I've been a professional sales manager in one form or the other for 30 years. I started when I was 14 years old, which you know, child prodigy. And every role where I've been a sales manager, the industry that I've been in has undergone change. And guess what? The good people adapted and succeeded. This change, yes, it's jarring. It happened quick. It's completely and totally manageable. But a lot of your brethren realtors are terrified. So what does that mean for you? Opportunity, guys. You get this down, you get your conversations right about how to deal with buyer agent compensation, how to pitch the changes to your sellers. You get this down quickly with good scripts. You're going to be so far ahead of your competition who are going to be shaking in their boots rather than going out and grabbing business, that it's your opportunity to go out and succeed. And I can't emphasize that enough. I've already talked to my partner. I still have a sales business. We already have our conversations in place. We've already tried it with a couple buyers, couple sellers. And guess what? It's gone fine. But if you operate from a place of fear, where it's like, gee, I don't even want to talk to my buyer about this buyer rep agreement, you've already defeated yourself. The buyers know it's changing. This whole NAR settlement is everywhere. Guide them through it. And what I'm hoping to do today is give you some tools by, first of all, teaching you the contracts, because knowing your contract is power. And you'd be shocked at how many agents don't take the time to know their contract. I'm not shocked. I see it all too often, but you would be. And then, the second thing is knowing how to approach the conversation. And then the last thing is having the intestinal fortitude to go out there and have the conversation. And you guys are realtors. You talk to people all the time. All you have to do is learn a new approach, and it's not that radically different, and you'll win. Okay? So with that in mind, let's do this. Okay? So I'm going to start out with some introductory overheads, and then I'm going to pull up the actual agreements. I know that some offices distributed the packet of contracts I'll be going over today. If you have it in front of you, it's a good place to take notes. If otherwise, take notes on a pad, and we'll get through this. We're planning on 3 hours. I'm not sure if it'll take that long. I've never done this this discussion before, so I was guesstimating. We'll take a break around 11 so I can catch my breath, and people here in Hollywood Hills can go move their cars depending on their parking situation. Then we'll get back going at 11:15 and hopefully knock this thing out, okay?
I also just want to quickly remind you, we are recording this and all of your offices will have the recording of it. And so we can point you to it if you need to rewatch it a couple of times.
Okay. So let's first of all talk about the NAR settlement and give you guys an update on how it's going to be implemented, or the timing, so to speak. The first issue is, the two most important forms that changed radically were the residential listing agreement and the buyer representation and compensation form. They're very, very different. They are available on the CAR website now as drafts, and it's a little arcane on how to get there. Later in the day, if we have time, I'll try and get on the internet and show you how to find them. They will become available on Zip Forms on July 24th. And the reason they picked July 24th is because that's my birthday. Maybe.
Your broker.
Yeah. But the thing to keep in mind is, hey, full compliance with the NAR settlement isn't due till August 17th. But when these new forms become available on July 24th, the old forms disappear. So here's the first bad news from your broker. I expect you to use the new forms and start implementing the new NAR rules on July 24th. Okay? And I will teach you what happens with existing listings that you may have right now, because I know that's going to be a key question. Because I'm sure in those listings, there is an offer of compensation to the buyer's broker. And we'll see why that's going to have to go away. Okay? I know, raised eyebrows. I just saw them. Okay. So I expect full compliance starting July 24th. It will require changes to existing listing agreements. We just talked about that. And it will require the buyer rep agreement for all buyers starting July 24th. So if you're working with buyers right now, when this new agreement's available on Zip Forms, you gotta get them to sign it. If you have an existing buyer broker agreement with them, you're gonna have to say, we're gonna have to switch to the new one. And if you have a listing agreement, I'll show you the form that you can do to modify the existing listing agreement. They didn't produce a form to modify existing buyer agreements, but they did do a form to modify existing listing agreements. And you will find as I talk to you, sometimes I mix up buyer and seller. Just tell me, Jeff, did you mean buyer? Did you mean seller? It doesn't mean that I'm incompetent and need to step down as broker. Okay, I just want you to know that. Okay. Okay. NAR settlement review. So let's just do a quick overview of the NAR settlement so that we're all on the same page. If you, for example, some of you might have been living under a rock for a while, but buyer representation agreement is going to be required for every buyer. It must disclose the amount or rate of compensation that the buyer will owe his agent or her agent. The compensation must be in the agreement. It cannot be open-ended, and you can't receive more compensation than what stay in the agreement. So I've been teaching this for the last 3 months, but doesn't hurt to reiterate. Here's, okay, yeah, next slide will cover that. The no cooperative compensation for buyer's agent on MLS. There will be no longer a field starting August 17th on the MLS where you can say, hey, buyer's agent, you're going to get 2.5%, 3%, gone. Okay? And then broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. We've been told to reiterate this by CAR, by NAR, by everyone. My comment is like, this is news. We all knew this for years, okay? But we just have to, you know, make sure that we emphasize. I can't remember what my silly comment is below that, so we'll just move on, okay? It's something, but I gotta move it. There it is. Will be beefed up in CAR forms. Okay. That wasn't a silly comment. I don't know what was going through my head. Now, there are some enormous changes. One enormous change from the last time I updated you on this and the last time I, you know, taught, for example, one of the agreements. And that change is that the Department of Justice got involved. So what happened is CAR started floating draft agreements that they thought would comply with the NAR settlement. The Department of Justice said, hey, we want to review those forms. So they did. And guess what the Department of Justice didn't like? Well, they didn't like that in the listing agreement that the seller could still offer the buyer's agent a cooperating commission. They feel that that's an antitrust issue or, you know, whatever. They felt that, you know, that is some sort of inherent evil that we've been using to get people to pay too much in commissions. Carr and NAR didn't feel like taking on the Department of Justice in this particular environment on this issue. So Carr had to go back to the forms and basically rewrite them. So now the seller cannot offer the buyer's agent a direct cooperating commission. It's not in the listing agreement. Pardon? There's still ways.
Paper anyway.
There's still ways to get it done, guys. Still ways to get it done. So it's no longer option in the listing agreement. Believe it or not, this will likely become law, California law, on January 1st. There's a bill going through the legislators. Yeah. Well, look at it this way, and this is just me speaking personally. You know, this issue's out there. There's been all sorts of publicity. Of course, a politician's going to jump on the bandwagon and saying we're protecting consumers, right? Of course, yeah, that's what they do. One positive thing is VA buyers can now pay a broker agent. Before, it was against the law for a VA buyer to pay their agent. Now it's not. So that is a good thing. You can take VA deals and use the buyer rep agreement. Okay? So the most important thing is there are 3 ways. Maybe it's better up there. There are 3 ways a buyer's agent can be compensated. So the buyer can still request through the RPA with paragraph, I think it's 3G3, for the seller to pay the buyer's obligation to their agent. So you see, and I think that's what will happen the most, right? Is that a lot of buyers are going to say, hey, I owe my agent 2.5%. I want you guys to pay it. Okay? I think that's what's going to happen the most. This whole idea of paying through a concession on the contract, in other words, a credit, is still going to be allowed as well. Now, just to get this on the table, I think there are some inherent issues with the credit problem. Is that I'm told by a very prominent risk management attorney who's on many of the Carr contract committees, so this is a voice of reason here. Lenders might have a problem with the concession, right? For example, let's say that a contract gets entered into and goes through counteroffers, and you know the buyer's commission obligation is $30K, and then that gets into the contract, the seller's going to credit $30K to the buyer. Well, then later in the deal, it turns out there's a whole bunch of maintenance issues with the property and, you know, crack foundation, you name it. And now the buyer wants another $50K credit. Well, now the total credit's $80K. The lender, the underwriter might start saying things like, that's too much credit. So what happens? You got a problematic deal, right? However, by using the buyer request, if it's written into the contract, the lenders are saying, we're not going to consider that a credit. So it's going to make it much easier to get deals through, because now when the request for repairs negotiation starts and there needs to be credits, you're starting from 0, as opposed to starting from $30K if the commission's being paid through a concession. So I think underwriters will like that. Frank, did you have a question?
Back in 2008, it was popular for people to write offers. Okay. Back in 2008, it was popular for people to write offers for maybe $100,000 over the list price and then ask for $100,000 credit. And at
That's
that
correct.
time, you know, that's what caused the whole fiasco in 2008. What happens now if a property is $1 million? Somebody says, let's write it at $1,025,000 and we want the seller to pay your commission. Is that going to be illegal? Is that going to be allowed?
It's not going to be illegal, but the lenders are going to crack down on that really fast is my suspicion, because the standards for lending have changed radically from 2008 and pre-recession. And most underwriters are going to see what's going on and say, that looks a little stinky for me, and they're going to prefer this methodology.
How are they going to discern though when we have multiple offers that go over asking price quickly?
Well, then in that case, it might work fine. But guess what? There's a lot of situations now where there aren't multiple offers. So I would recommend doing the strategy that I just talked about rather than what you were saying.
Okay.
Okay?
3G3's been in the contract. 3G3's been in the contract since December 2022 because Carr was already anticipating and asking us to use buyer broker agreements back then.
Mhm.
So
So the other way that the buyer agent's going to get paid is directly by their buyer. And some buyers might do that. They might want to make their offer look stronger, especially on the high end, by saying, hey, you don't have to pay my broker anything. And the buyer just pays his agent directly. Now, someone asked me, hey, Jeff, how are we going to collect that? Well, you're going to send your buyer broker agreement to escrow, and escrow is going to include that in the amount of closing funds the buyer needs to bring in. Okay? Is that it? I thought I had one more. I did have more, but I can't get to them. Oh, there they are. Just pressing the wrong button. Okay, the forms we'll cover today, and we're not going to go through every one of these line by line or even all of them line by line. I'm going to focus on changes. Yes.
Right, on the market, just have the buyer commission offered, even though it's already on there, it's gonna be taken away, or what's on there is on there until.
It's gone. It's gone on August 17th.
It's already been on the market.
Even if it's already been on the market, the commission field disappears on August 17th.
you just need to call people and ask them now before you
So-
go see the house.
So here is the forms I'm going to talk about. Residential listing agreement. The BCA stands for Buyer Commission Advisory or Broker Commission Advisory. I forget which. MLS-A. We'll talk about very briefly, but you'll see it. MTLA is the form you're going to use to modify existing listings on the 17th or before. BRBC, of course, is the buyer representation agreement. PSRA, think of this as buyer representation agreement light. Yeah, basically, if you're got a buyer, he just wants to see one property and you don't have enough of connection to get him to sign the full BRBC, this agreement is basically for a very short time, just to
I
show
think
one
it's going to
property.
work good at
Boom,
open
boom, boom.
houses. If someone walks in and says, I want to write an offer, you just have a bunch of these ready.
So we'll talk about that. The BFPI, I think it basically is for the buyer to disclose to you what their finances look like, which I think is a form we should have had years ago. And then this open house form, because everyone said, oh my gosh, with all this stuff where we have to have a buyer broker agreement in place before we show a buyer a property, what happens if someone walks into my open house? And basically this form will cover that. And what it really looks like is an open house sign-in sheet. So it looks very innocuous. But what I really like about it is it basically says, hey, you're coming to an open house. We're supposed to have an agreement before we show you anything. We're just saying that we're complying with the law. And by the way, we need you to sign in to acknowledge that you saw this disclaimer. And it asks for name, email address, and phone number. And so when I'm working open houses, I'm going to say, hey, this is the law now. This is, the settlement from a lawsuit. We all have to do it. Every realtor has to do it. I'm afraid you have to sign the form. You have no excuse for not signing in now. And now I have all their contact information. Yes.
And they must sign everything. I need all the phone number, the email, because you know how they do in open houses.
Well, you know, now this looks like a legal document. So yeah, I think you're going to be much, have much more authority to get them to do the whole thing.
It's not required that they sign.
Oh, yes, it
Yeah.
is.
It's not.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
He was asking about like if they need to leave all their information. I don't think they need to leave all their information, correct?
I don't
It's
think
just they
need
do
to,
need to
but I think
sign
you
that
can,
they were
I think you
there.
can, I think you can be a little more forceful about getting it.
Yeah.
But they do need to sign the form.
have another
Frank,
question.
And we'll get there. Yeah.
Kim,
They also.
there's a box.
Yes, they
There's a
will have to
box
sign in
that-
as well,
yeah.
but they can mark that they have an agent.
Mm.
Okay, but we'll get to the form though.
There was a question online that said, can we ask for ID?
No, no.
So I
So,
need to see some ID.
can I have
like
your
red-
passport, birth certificate? Can you draw an outline of your home key? Yeah, one quick, and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Wondering in that situation, if someone politely says, actually, I'm not signing, I'm just walking in.
Hey, I'm sorry, but read the form. It says that, we have to
Okay.
disclose to everyone who comes
Then
in
you
for
can
the
stop people
settlement
from
of a
coming into
lawsuit.
a house. It's
Yeah.
not their house.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's, yeah.
Well, he's not saying it's a requirement. He's saying it should make it easier for
Yeah.
you to be able to get people
Yeah.
to sign in, is what he's saying.
And my understanding, it is a requirement though. but
Oh, well,
I
we can-
could be
we can
wrong. This is all
fine-tune
new,
the
but
print.
that's my understanding. Okay? So let's move on. Let's move on. We got a lot to get through today. In addition to this class, CAR is offering classes as well. There's one going on right now. But these are the remaining class dates for CAR classes. Are they all gone? Oh my God, they are all gone. I'm sorry. So you're stuck with me. I'm your last chance. Okay, guys?
I saw something else that I had signed up for that they sent me where it's like these recorded videos that you can watch. So I believe they do have stuff. It's just not live.
Yeah.
The live stuff didn't matter all that much anyway, because you couldn't ask questions. So yeah, you go back and watch, and we're recording this too. So
So you're stuck with me is what the bottom line is.
Who's your broker?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to share a different document. Oh, we got 115 on the,
You're popular.
I invited a few.
yeah.
They don't get the lunch though.
Okay.
There we go.
does anybody need one of these who doesn't have one of Who else? Sorry.
No, I was gonna give it to you.
Okay. So we're going to start with the residential listing agreement. Okay? And I'm going to sit down or I'm going to kill myself. Okay. Residential listing agreement. So, quick overview. The biggest change here is the entire offering of cooperative commission to the buyer's agent is gone. And then remember, there used to be a ton of language about the MLS, why the MLS was wonderful, and all that. For whatever reason, they pulled that out and stuck it in a separate advisory. And the reason for that is you have to offer your clients the opportunity more forcefully to not put it on the MLS. And the DOJ felt by having that language in the listing agreement, it was kind of forcing sellers to put it on the MLS. They're lawyers, not realtors. So basically, all that language about why the MLS is great is in a separate advisory now, which I'm still going to present to all my sellers and have them sign. So let's see how that was implemented. The other thing that they did is they decided this was the perfect opportunity to revamp the listing agreement to the same format as the purchase agreement, where all the stuff that needs to be filled in occurs on the first page or two in this table format. So this is, basically changing it to the same format as the RPA. So it looks really different. And you think, oh my God, this is wildly different. Not as different as you think when you get into the guts of it.
No, it's so much better this way, I think.
Some people feel that way, yes. I actually like the old way because it's easier to teach the agreement, but that's just me. So, this is just a statement saying that that's how the format works. But look at, listing period. We all know that. But now there's a requirement that it's not a listing period cannot exceed 24 months if it's a 1 to 4 unit property and not owned by an entity. If it's an individual selling, then the listing period cannot exceed 24 months. I will argue with you guys that if you were taking listing agreements for more than 24 months, that might not have been the best practice anyway, okay?
Seen that before.
I have not either. And then, just what kind of listing is this? If it's anything other than a single family home of some sort, you can check a box here. If it's a probate, you can check the box and add the right form. That nothing big difference here. Now we get to compensation. This is where we need the focus is on this, what is it, 1C or 2C? 2C. Okay, first of all, that same statement that we've always had about commissions being fully negotiable is here. And in order to make that even more powerful, they've added this compensation advisory form, which will be automatically attached to the listing agreement. And that form, which we'll go through in a minute, is an excellent opportunity to educate your seller about how the new world of commissions is working, okay? It's also a good form for explaining that to buyers as well. So I will spend some time on that form when we're done with this, because I think you should be using it as a tool in your conversations with clients. Yes,
It's attached.
it's attached. Yes. Yeah. So compensation to seller's broker. Notice only seller's side of transaction. Percent of the listing price and a bonus if you can get it. Blah, blah, blah. Percentage above is based on purchase price. If, so the terms and conditions we used to have on how we got paid, that's all in the back of the agreement, so it hasn't changed. We get paid when the deal closes or if the seller breaches the agreement by pulling the house off the market. Nothing's changed in that regard. Okay. What about if the if the buyer's unrepresented, they don't have any agent at all. They're anticipating that this is going to happen more often. So what they've done is in the broker compensation advisory, they describe about how much extra work we have to do in that case to help justify the fact that we want more money if we're going to have to deal with an unrepresented buyer. So you check the box, or no, excuse me, you put in an additional percentage. So let's say I want another, I want 2.5% of the listing price. If I'm just representing you, I want another 1.5. If I'm not, it's not dual agency, you're not representing that buyer, but you're having to deal with a buyer who doesn't have an agent, and we all know that's extra work, 1.5%. Now there is a form that we're going to have buyer and seller sign and I forget the name of the form, but I'll get that for you, that says to the buyer, you've entered into this transaction, I'm representing the seller, I will help you here and there, but there is no agency. Okay? No agency. I'm only representing the seller. I have no fiduciary duties toward you. Because that's what has to happen in this case, right?
And you said that's a separate form?
Separate form. Yeah. Okay.
And is there ever a point, Jeff, where you, like, we would establish agency with them as well, or is there no more dual representation?
No, there is dual representation. But if you're representing both buyer and seller, then of course you need to disclose that to the seller, and you have to have a buyer representation agreement with that buyer. Okay? That's how dual agency will work going forward.
Yeah, just keep in mind,
What would-
without a contract, you're unemployed. So if the buyer doesn't sign a contract with you, you're not employed by them. Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense. I guess my question is that, because I see two ways kind of to address this, Jeff. Like, either one, we check this box 4C, and then we get extra compensation by working with that buyer, or we sign a buyer rep agreement with them and agree to our own commission structure. Do you see as one or the other being more advantageous or protecting us from a legal standpoint? I mean, it seems actually better if we're getting the compensation from the seller to just, then we don't really have any obligation to the buyer, right?
Yeah,
Which
but
one is better in your purview?
Well, I don't think you're going to get full commission from an unrepresented buyer. I don't think the seller's going to pay you a full 2.5 or 3% for handling the unrepresented buyer. So I think if you want a higher commission rate, you're going to want the buyer representation agreement. I personally would prefer to represent the buyer because I'm concerned that the unrepresented buyer, even after they sign the agreement saying there's no fiduciary, blah, 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 if something goes wrong, they'll still sue you anyway. So I might as well have the buyer rep agreement and have a better case for the higher commission. And, I'm going to be doing the same work anyway, is the way I see it. But there will be some buyers, it's like, oh, we don't need an agent now, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. I still want to take your offer. So there you go. Okay?
May I ask a question here from Zoom land?
Yeah, well, I'll go Zoom first and then Jason second.
Okay, my question is, if you end up that you are representing both in agency, would you still be using 4C as well, even though you're representing?
I think 4C gets eliminated because that's if it's the buyer's unrepresented by
Yeah,
you.
that's correct. That 4C is only used if the buyer has no agent. Correct. Jason?
The compensation percentage, flat fee, or compensation schedule, what is the blank after and if any, what is that used for? Maybe you mentioned this, I missed it. After the price and then all caps and if any blank, what is that blank?
I have no clue. Yeah.
So, and
Well, it could be some alternate form of compensation, 100 shares of stock and,
A brand new car.
something or the, I don't think so. Yeah. Yes.
So actually, do the residential listing agreement with your seller and you check off C2 with the seller, then all of a sudden you get a buyer that you're going to represent. Will C2 become null and void?
That's correct. Because
Okay.
that buyer's represented.
See the
Okay.
word unrepresented?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I am personally, what I'm going to do is put in something like 2.5% here, and I'm automatically going to put in another 1.5 in case that unrepresented buyer pops up. And I'll explain carefully to the seller why that is, and we'll negotiate it, right? So this is the old time, I'm on C3 here. This is just the time period for, like 60 days, if the offer expires, an agent or people who saw the property during the listing period, still write an offer. It's that whole construct that we've been doing for years, no change. And then C4 is just, hey, this is part of the old contract as well. Basically, hey, you had listed before, that listing expired, that previous listing agent submitted a list of buyers who saw the property during their listing period, so they're excluded from this agreement. Same stuff we've done before. Okay, so the meat of it is really C1, 2. That's the part you have to get used to doing different. Okay. Now, items to be included and excluded. This is part of the old agreement as well, right? And it's really just bookkeeping for you to know if there's any personal property they're selling with the house or any real property they want to keep. Remember, it all has to go in the ultimate purchase agreement. Whatever's put in here has no force between buyer and seller. Okay? Do you want the property to be on an MLS? And basically, we all want it to be on MLS, so we're going to put whatever our primary MLS is and others. We've done that for years, but then there's this car form MLSA. This is the form that basically has all that old language from the listing agreement that said how wonderful the MLS is. Okay, that it is not. You have to add it yourself. Okay. Now, just so you know, and I will be requiring it be added by all the offices. It'll be part of a new checklist, which unfortunately I haven't been able to get done because they keep changing the damn forms, but I will get the checklist out as soon as I can. The one thing that is not in the MLSA, if you remember from the current listing agreement, it talks a lot about how there's a offer of compensation to the buyer's agent listed in the MLS. Of course, that's all gone. Okay. Then the rest of this stuff is really pretty straightforward. I know there's a lot of red, but it's nothing all that different than what we had before. And remember, whatever's not on that first page to fill in, what's back here is language to explain what you filled in on the front page. So, for example, it still says that if the seller makes the property unmarketable, we get paid. If for some reason, and I'm on E1 and 2 now, if the buyer breaches the agreement and the seller recovers damages, we're entitled to a percentage of the damages the seller collected. I don't know an agent on the planet who's ever collected a piece of a deposit that the seller has recovered. Well, okay, Renee knows one, but it's very rare. And frankly, the seller's so mad the deal fell through that you're probably just trying to placate them in order to make sure they keep the listing on the market. So, why ask for that money? What else is going on here? The seller's compensation to other brokers. This is not what you think it is. This is basically the same language that we used to have before that say, hey, listen, Mr. Seller, if you had an agent before and they had an exclusion list and you didn't tell us about the exclusion list and we do all the work, you might have to pay 2 brokers. So or you didn't tell us about the exclusion list, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, if the seller has the exclusion list, he better give it to us or he might have to pay twice. Okay. Now notice this maximum listing period by law. Once again, the California State Legislature is protecting consumers from a practice that was absolutely hardly ever used. But no problem. I'm not going to go through 5A. We already talked about it. this is all stuff that has to be in the ultimate purchase agreement anyway. No change on 6. Excuse me. No change on 7. I think that 7B, though, we should talk about this. And before I go into 7P, remember in that Missouri case that caused all this in the first place, one of the overriding factors that caused us problems is a lack of transparency. And I do believe there are agents out there who aren't transparent enough. And if we want to avoid that accusation in the future, guess what? We need to be more transparent. And that's what the language on 7B here is all about. Strategies affecting delayed offers and buyer broker compensation. And I'm going to read this and then we'll talk about it for a moment. There are different strategies for obtaining the best offer for seller. Sellers advise that certain buyers may prefer not to be in a competitive situation and either may not make an offer if there is an instruction that all offers will be presented at a later specified time, or may try to make a preemptive offer that will expire shortly, hoping that the seller will accept before the presentation date. Additionally, certain buyers may not be able or allowed to pay compensation to a buyer's broker. These buyers may request for seller to pay buyer's broker through a term in the purchase agreement or through a separate compensation agreement. Sellers advised to discuss and consider the best strategy for seller related to the presentation of offers. What this is telling you is when you take a listing, talk with your seller and say, here's some different ideas from presenting offers. Which one do you want to follow? For example, if we set a deadline date, do you want me to present offers that come in before that? Or are you telling me not even to show them to you? Or if they're above a certain threshold, do you want me to show them to you? Have that discussion, work out what you're going to do, then confirm that in an email. And then you have a written instruction from the seller on what to do. For example, if some buyer says, I know you have a deadline, but I insist you present this ahead of time. Well, by law, if you don't have a written instruction from the seller saying, don't show me any offers until XYZ date, you do have to present that offer. But if you have a written instruction from your seller saying, no, I don't even want to see him until the deadline, I don't want to deal with preemptive offers. Hey, sorry, Mr. Buyer, I have a written instruction from my seller. And you'll get some buyer agents, oh no, you have to show it. Not if I have a written instruction with my seller, I don't, okay? Or conversely, he'll say maybe, yeah, if it's over 50K, present it. And then you'll get buyer agents who'll say, oh, there was a deadline. I had a written instruction from my seller saying that if it was over a certain threshold, I was to present it. Well, that's not fair. Take it up with the seller. It's his house. Okay? But
Hey,
this
Jeff.
way you are covered. Hey, yeah. Hey, what?
Sorry, it's Esther. Conversely, because a seller may not write that, but if you asked or had a template to say, this is our agreed upon terms, do you agree? Is that what you would want to see?
Absolutely. That would be a wonderfully professional way to handle it.
Can you put that directly in the listing agreement?
You could put it directly in the listing agreement as an addendum. Yeah, absolutely. Both of those are very professional ways of handling this. But I see this as a potential liability going forward. And, my job is to try and predict these things and give you guys strategies on how to alleviate it, okay? Renee loves lawsuits, but we try to reduce them.
Like it with my morning coffee.
Okay. Okay, once again, your seller might want some exposure to what we mean by unrepresented buyers. this paragraph basically is telling them what we mean by that. So if they kind of freak out when you check that unrepresented buyers box and ask for comp, use the CAR form that that buyer compensation advisory form to explain, and then show them this paragraph. But what they do call out here is that buyer non-agency form. That, I remember I told you there's a form we'll get the buyer to sign to say, or actually we'll get both parties to sign, excuse me, to say that, hey, you're not represented in this transaction. We have no fiduciary to you. That's the form, buyer NA. Now, the open house visitor non-agency disclosure and sign-in we'll talk about more. I don't think that you can't use that if you've accepted the offer from the unrepresented agent. That's not enough, in my opinion, to protect against claims that the buyer thought he was represented. I want this B&A form signed. Okay?
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
If the seller doesn't want us to represent the buyer, just to make sure that they can maintain that fiduciary relationship in a way that they're being advocated for, but a buyer comes in and wants to write an offer, then what's our obligation on the listing side to provide resources or services to allow the buyer to write in a way that they can't say that we were withholding or keeping them from writing the offer?
Well, basically Esther, you're gonna have that buyer sign the B&A form. So they're writing the offer, but they're unrepresented.
And when they write the offer, like, do we have to provide them with certain things, or are they just gonna
No, you're
come up
gonna
with
have,
something?
you're gonna have to write the offer. You're gonna
Okay.
have to show them the disclosures. That's why we're getting extra money,
Mhm.
because that, there's extra work.
In the RPA where it talks about the two agencies, the buyer agency would be blank,
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah.
Right, but I'm saying some sellers don't even want to be represented. So in that case, what you're saying, the B&A protects us to say we're just providing information, but they're just writing it and we're not advising, right?
That's right. We're not providing advice. They told us what to fill in. The B&A says there's no agency. If they ask for advice on negotiating strategy, I'm sorry, you're unrepresented. Tell me what number you want me to fill in. Okay? Yeah.
Got it.
Jeff, I had a question.
If a
to
buyer is
piggyback
Just a,
on-
unrepresented,
just a moment on Zoom. I'll get to you in just a second. Jason?
a buyer is unrepresented,
Yeah.
buyer wants listing agent to represent the buyer, seller doesn't want that. Listing agent refers the buyer to another agent,
Right.
getting like a referral fee.
Yes. That will.
Buyer submits. What is a obligation to disclose, or how does that affect?
That
all
hasn't
this?
changed. We tell the seller what we've always told the seller is that, hey, we referred that buyer to another agent in our office.
But do we disclose what we're getting for that referral, whether it's 25% or 50% or whatever is negotiated between the listing agent and the agent getting the referral?
We've never done it before. I don't see why we have to do it now. Yeah.
And if, would that change if the agent getting the referral is at the same office?
No, it's never, we've never had to disclose that, and I don't have any instruction from risk management that we need to now.
I think as long as it's pretty cut and dry that they're representing the buyer and your fiduciary is out of
Yeah,
it.
don't make it a straw man situation where you're still doing the work, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
was
We
the-
had a question on
And
Zoom
yeah,
first.
and then
Go ahead, the Zoom question.
Well, that was me, Jeff, but he kind of answered the question, because what
Okay.
if the seller doesn't want me to represent the buyer and feels like that's a conflict? So I would suggest then,
You refer it out.
refer that person out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thanks.
Yeah, another question here.
So this is kind of confusing. If you're on a team and it's two agents, and then can you either split up or have one, or do you have to like rewrite the agreement and have like the names split up?
No, I mean, you can have a team, you can have a buyer's agent, you can have a listing agent. It's all dual agency anyway, because you all report to the same broker. but that's disclosed. And yeah, you can have one member of a team representing buyer, one member of a team representing seller. If you are on a team and that's happening, you do need to disclose to the seller that one of our team members will represent this buyer. And if the seller says, I'm not comfortable with that, don't do it. Then refer it out outside your team. Okay?
So, is there a way, that the buyer will be represented by the seller's agent, yet nobody agrees to pay commission? But is that possible? Is that a situation?
I think every office here will be unhappy with a policy where we don't get compensated for taking on the liability of representing someone.
So if you represent a buyer and you don't get paid for it and then you get sued,
Yeah.
that's the big issue.
So-
You have to be very, very careful about the fiduciary duty, which is why it's really important that if a buyer walks in and you have to separate on paper whether or not the fiduciary duty is with them, because the biggest lawsuits are from buyers, I think.
Well, they
There's
come-
a bunch of them, but
they
there's a
come
lot of
from
lawsuits
everywhere.
from buyers that, like the dual agency thing, it's one of the biggest lawsuits we
Yeah.
have in the industry. So you have to get paid for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it also causes an insurance problem when there's uncompensated agency. The insurance company thinks that something funny was going on, so we don't like those. We don't like them at all. Okay. The rest of this hasn't really changed much. This is all language from the old agreement with just some tweaks here and there. Oh, this one's very important. The P in property is now capitalized. Everyone write that down, please. Okay, get that there. Okay. And that's about it here. This is just a little tweaking of making sure this entity sellers is a little more clear. Nothing major there. Make sure, by the way, that if you are on a team and multiple people are interacting with the seller in a relatively significant manner, to check the box to say more than one agent from the same firm is working with the seller. And that way we're covered. I have been involved in a lawsuit at one of the offices where a team was representing the seller. The team lead took the listing, and then two of the agents under him really did all the grunt work. And then there was a problem. The seller sued and said there was these two agents I wasn't even contracted to work with, and they all screwed up. And the lawyer said it was a problem that we didn't have that box checked and the AAA done. So just if you're on a team and you got multiple people doing significant work for the seller, check the box.
Jeff, I have a question on compensation, concessions, whatever you want to call it, procedure, because I'm hearing several different things. I just heard from an agent with another brokerage that the new DOJ changes that they made stated that, obviously we can't put concessions in the MLS, but he also stated that we can no longer verbally tell people what concessions are, and we can no longer put the concessions in a website or anything. It must be done through the purchase agreement only. And I'd like to know with certainty what our procedure is.
I have not heard any feedback from the risk management attorneys that I've consulted that we are not allowed to advertise concessions. I believe they are conflating concessions with cooperative compensation, the people you've heard from. Okay?
As of right now, we can still say if somebody calls us,
Our seller is willing to consider concessions.
but we can't say a specific amount.
Can't say a specific amount, and you can't say only to be used for commission. You have to say, yeah, they'll consider commissions, and the buyer can use that for what they feel is appropriate. And they can even ask, can one of the categories be compensation to the agent. Say, yeah, but you know, we can't write that in the contract. It's just a concession, and then the buyer gets to use it as they want.
I think that's an important point, just to
Yeah.
clarify to everybody that we can say that there are concessions allowed, but we cannot speak to the amount.
I think the perfect,
Wait,
Lang-
we might be
Excuse me.
talking apples and oranges though,
I
because
don't
you're
think we
talking
are.
about MLS, right?
well, there's going to be a concessions in the MLS. You're going to be allowed to say that the seller will consider concessions, but not the amount.
But then verbally, if someone calls me on my listing and says, hey, is your seller going to pay buyer broker commission?
Well, no, of course they're not, because there is no more buyer broker commission.
but we're
But
gonna-
my seller will consider a concession, or if you want to put it on paragraph 3G3 and check that box on the RPA, my seller will consider that. And can you guarantee they'll pay it? Of course I can't, but propose it and we'll have a negotiation. Remember, transparency, negotiation, okay?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that. I'm
1
just-
minute on Zoom.
Look.
Let me take this in-house question. I'll get right to you.
If a listing agent verbally or by text message or by email says to a buyer's agent that the seller will consider concessions, or even that the seller will pay 2.5%, it's absolutely not enforceable. All
Yeah,
real
it's
estate
only gonna
has
have
to
to
be
be in
written
writing.
in
Yeah.
contract and in writing. So no
Sure.
matter what we're talking about here, at the end of the day, there's no agreement between the seller and the listing agent that they will offer a commission to a buyer's agent. And there's nothing that a listing agent can do to guarantee to a buyer's agent that they will be paid a commission, which means the buyer's agent must get a commitment, a signed contract from the buyer to pay the commission, and then negotiate with the seller in a purchase agreement to try to get them to pay it.
It sounds like you're working for the Department of Justice. That's what they want. Yeah. No. Jason couldn't be more right. That's exactly how it's going down, guys. Okay, question from Zoom.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed this. I was a little late, but we were in a meeting on Wednesday and we were told that there will be a concession line. I completely understand that it is not a legal obligation. It's not a contractual obligation, but we were told we could put in a percentage or amount on the MLS. Are you saying that's changed since?
I'm saying that my latest information is we could not, but it's possible, because a lot of this is in flux, it's possible that the CAR and NAR have negotiated something where we can put a concession amount. But
Well, it's
once
the
again,
timing.
once
It's the
again,
timing I'm curious about, because the DOJ thing with CAR came out yesterday. So is this something brand new, or is this something you've heard?
this is something I knew from about a week or so ago. So if there's something brand new where we can, but remember, that's only going to be a proposal, just like Jason said.
No, I understand that.
The actual amount will have to be eventually settled in the contract.
Of
I
course.
frankly think that change is entirely possible, because why can't you put, seller is willing to offer XYZ concession. It'll be just like saying on the MLS, hey, seller will hand you the washer and dryer.
Yeah.
But that has to be in the ultimate contract or it's not enforceable.
Right.
Yes.
So are we still using cooperating broker agreements?
No, they're gone. They're gone.
Okay, so, if, for example, I have an off-market deal and, the agent representing a buyer wants to get some sort of commitment before showing it to know that they're not gonna get cut out, how does that work?
They have to have a buyer broker.
Because there's no like.
They
'cause it's not-
have a buyer broker agreement with their buyer.
So they have to have that first.
You have to have a buyer broker agreement before you show any property.
And they can only request their commission or the.
And they
the buyer
request the
fee.
commission through paragraph 3G3 of the RPA. Now, they can have a discussion on the phone with the listing agent. Hey, what do you think? Do you think your seller will agree to it? And the listing agent say, well, I've had discussions with my seller and they seem inclined to be willing to pay it. But, we don't know, can't guarantee it until you put it on the contract and we negotiate it through, right?
And same goes for leases.
Same goes for leases, yeah.
Can we
Thank you.
require that To see the buyer broker agreement in that case, like an off.
Yeah, when that happens with the 3G3, hang on, I gotta tell this person it's gotta be later. I do got to call him though.
28 minutes to learn.
Yeah, I do need to get to the forms. On the 3G3, there's a bunch of forms that get filled out that says, here is what my buyer broker agreement looks like. Both parties sign it. So there is validation that that agreement actually exists. And here's what was called out in it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the
Reminder for those of you who are late, we're breaking at 11 o'clock for 15 minutes, just as a
I'm
reminder.
gonna move on to another agreement. And this one is the buyer compensation advisory. Now, this isn't an agreement. Remember, advisory means this is just cool information that we think you should have. It doesn't create any contractual commitment. But this is a document that I think you should be using to help explain to your clients how the new rules are working, okay? So it has a discussion of how there's optional additional compensation if buyer is unrepresented. So it has a discussion to explain to your client how that works. So I'm going to attach this to all my listing agreements and pull it out while we're discussing commission to help explain to them how all that is working. Now, I'm not going to read this whole agreement to you because we've gone through a pretty good explanation of how this is working already and answered a lot of questions. So for the sake of time, I'm going to recommend you pull out this form and read it on your own, because we've discussed the concepts behind this already. Same with dual agency. Remember, I told you if you're doing dual agency, you're going to have a separate buyer representation agreement with that buyer, even if you're the listing agent, okay? And then, this was for information for sellers. Now this is information for buyers here somewhere. There it is. I'm going too fast. If for some reason it looks like the second page of this form didn't show up, sorry about that. Probably my mistake in sending it to Rhea. But no, it's not that. It's not.
This is attached both to the BRBC and the RLA, right?
Yeah, correct. So the buyer, once again, it's telling the buyers that the comp is fully negotiable. You have to, and it says, hey, because of a settlement lawsuit, we have to have these written agreements before we can show you a property, because you're going to have buyers pushing back. Why do I have to sign something? Blah, blah, blah. Whip this out, and then you can help to. Does anyone have a packet with them real quick? Maybe it's on the back of the packet. Is it?
On the back.
Is page 2 on the back? Okay. You have a page 2?
Yes.
Here, let me take a quick look at this. Sorry about that, user error. Okay, so page 2, I'm just going through this. Advantages of written agreements, so that's just, why you should do things in writing. Okay. Renee's going to put this on Zoom somehow. So then number 3, when enlisting a real estate broker to represent them, buyers agree to pay the buyer's broker when escrow closes, but the person responsible for payment may be negotiated in the transaction. So all of section 3 on page 2 is explaining to the buyer how you are on the hook for this, but we can ask the seller to pay your obligation. So it's really just explanatory language to the buyer about the stuff I'm teaching you today, okay? And then the last section of 3 is explained to the buyers that, yeah, it used to be different, but now it changed. historically in California, many sellers brokers used MLS to make a unilateral offer to compensate a buyer's broker who procure the buyer for the seller's property. However, because we want to stick our nose in your business, no, it says, however, the nationwide NARD settlement prohibits the seller's broker from using an MLS to make such an offer of compensation. And so the listing agreement no longer allows sellers to do this, blah, blah, blah. So that's page 2. I'm sorry it's not in the packet on the screen, but nothing, crazy substantial there. But use this form. I think it's the best way to help educate your clients on what's going on. Okay? Okay, how far are we to break? Okay, 20 minutes. We're not doing bad on time. There is a remote possibility we'll get out here early, but I might use the extra time to sell all you guys Amway, so you never know. Okay.
Yeah, and don't forget too, we do have lunch showing up if you want to stick around for lunch, and a 1031 exchange class after that.
Okay.
So
Okay, no more advertising for Renee on that. Multiple listing service addendum. This will be the form you will use to change your current listing agreements to comply on August 17th. Yes, if you have a current listing that has an offer of cooperating commission and you don't have that deal in escrow prior to August 17, you're going to have to change your listing.
yeah, there's no second page on
Oh my gosh.
The packages
You guys
are missing a lot of pages. A lot of pages are missing.
The contracts are actually all these drafts. He's mentioning all the important stuff, and all the drafts are going to be out in 5 days on CAR.
Okay.
It's all going to be there for you.
I apologize.
Well, you know what I'll do is we'll get the correct package from Jeff, and then I'll just send it out as an
Yeah.
email. So
If
you guys
someone
can.
has a copy of page 2 of this, let me have it because I, yeah,
Yeah, the MLS.
okay. But let's go through this one and then I will,
So here, can I take a picture of it?
yes. Quiet, please. Let's do one meeting, please. Yes. You can do it as early as July 24th. And I will be. I have a listing that's going on the market like next week. So I get to have this wonderful discussion. So the top part, yes, they are. I'll show you how to get there. So on page 1 here, it has, the standard stuff saying what property it is, who the buyer seller is. It explains what MLS is. We all know that. Benefits. Oh no, this is a different addendum. This is not the addendum where you are altering the listing. My bad. This is the one that explains why the MLS is a fantastic thing. Okay. So I'm not even going to go into huge detail on this. I am going to attach
This is
it.
attached to the listing agreement.
Yeah, this will
correct?
be attached to the listing agreement to explain to your sellers why we still want to put everything on the MLS. Okay. And I'm not going to go through it because it's language ripped from the old listing agreement. And the only change is it doesn't talk about offer of cooperating commission anymore. Okay, Jason?
Does this form replace the SELM?
It does not.
There's language on paragraph 3, public market property that looks very much like the SELM.
It does, but no, you would use both because this, oh, I take it back. It does replace the SELM. I forgot what the risk management attorney told me. You can use this in place of it. Yes. Okay. Okay, here's the one. I knew it was coming. I was foreshadowing. Here's the one that you will use to change your existing listings. I apologize for the mistake. Okay. So modification of terms listing agreement. So this will replace the old CAR form MT. Remember, that's how you modify your listing before. This is the new and improved version, and it's what we're going to use to change our current listings on August 17th. So listing agreement dated between these people for this property at this address. You can change the price, you can change the expiration date. And then it says that the amount of real estate commission is not fixed by law. And guess what? Other. So what are you going to put in other? Okay, you're going to say that the seller will no longer offer a cooperating compensation to the buyer's broker. That's the sentence you'll write in. The seller will no longer offer a cooperating commission to the buyer's broker. Now, would you use that Carform BCA when you were getting the seller to sign this to explain how it's going to work? Of course you are. You're going to say, okay, that doesn't mean that we might not be paying the buyer's broker, but we're not going to be doing it through a binding offer on the MLS anymore. Here's the way it works now. They're either going to ask for it when they submit their offer, or you're going to offer a concession saying you're willing to consider it, paying it as a concession. But this form will change the listing agreement so they're not obligated to do something we're not allowed to do anymore. Okay? Any questions about this one?
We need to do, we're currently in a listing, it's just add that.
If you think about it, that's the one thing that has to be changed. Jason?
So have a listing at 5%, 2.5% is offered to a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
We get this form signed, we put the language that you're saying, sellers no longer offering commission to buyer's agent. The commission is still 5%.
Oh, that's an excellent point. I should have thought that through better. So what I would say is total compensation, the first sentence I gave you, and then total compensation due to listing agents upon a successful transaction shall be whatever amount you guys agree. That's a better construct.
Hey,
Jason is a
Jeff.
lawyer, so he's covering my back here. So yeah.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
Robert Erickson. Can we get a script so we don't have to try to reinvent that sentence you just said? To put in the script for that other part?
Well, we're all writing it down right now, Robert.
Oh, you are? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Renee, would you be able to send those exact word out? Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Second sentence is total compensation due listing agent upon the successful transaction shall be XYZ% of the ultimate purchase price. Plus 1% shall be due to Jeff Curtis broker. No.
Actually, do we need to talk about that other box now on the RLA where if an unrepresented buyer comes in, are we going to reiterate that or?
You could, or you could just handle it when the unrepresented buyer comes in. If you want to get that. You could do that. You could do that. It all depends on your client. Yes, you would cancel the old one and write a new one. The risk management attorney recommended doing it this way, but there's nothing that prevents you from canceling this agreement and writing a new one.
Cancellation could be right in that same DocuSign packet.
Of course.
The new one, so
Yeah.
there's no question.
Yeah.
It has to be canceled on the MLS.
No, not necessarily. Not if you're doing it simultaneously. Yeah.
The clock doesn't have to reset.
I mean, technically, I would say the MLS would say our rule says that we have to do it, but I don't think anyone at the MLS, if you do something simultaneously like that, is going to make you take the listing off and throw it back on. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
The beginning date and the end, I guess as long as the end date isn't changing on
Yeah.
the new contract, then there's no real reason to.
Yeah.
We are being recorded, just so you know. Maybe we'll eliminate that.
We're
part from the
thinking out
recording.
loud here. We're thinking out loud.
We're thinking out loud, yeah.
Okay? And recognize I'm learning this in real time as well, but and there will be questions. Rob E. from Hollywood, California, you have a question, just ask it, please.
He might have asked it already.
Okay, Robert, don't ask the question then. Okay. Okay, so it's not 11 yet, but we're about to dive into the buyer rep agreement. Let's take that as one distinct whole.
Okay.
What's a good time to come back? 11:10?
I do have one question, comment, if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the phone with our MLS last Friday, and they told me that even when we change to no longer advertising buyers commissions, if we had advertised, say, a 2% buyer compensation, we still need to honor that unless we completely cancel the listing and relist with the new RLA.
That's what the MLS told you? Because I'm not hearing that from the attorneys involved in drafting these forms. That's interesting. How can we have a binding commitment to pay if we're not allowed to do it anymore? I will check on that.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, so turn off the recording for a second, but you often get conflicting information when you call the MLS. Not
Yeah.
all their people are up to speed. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying it possibly is wrong. Okay.
Okay.
So, but I will check on that one. Okay. There's Jennifer Gorchenko at the PV board. There's a great resource. I'll give her a ring. Okay.
Up until August 17th.
Well, and up until August 17th, absolutely. Yeah.
And then after August 17th, maybe it's.
Yeah, that could be the case, but I will look into that. It's a good question. So let's see if we can get it answered. I don't want to give you an answer now because I don't know. That could be right. But let's take our break. We get back at 11:10.
Yep.
I will start talking again. If you're on Zoom, just leave it up and running. At 11:10, I'll come talk to you guys again.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here.
God, you wouldn't believe the changes. Huge. Taking a 10-minute break. There's 116 people on this Zoom. It's all about the huge changes coming out this 17th.
Hey, Tom, you're not muted.
You already have a listing with Tom. I have to get him to sign mandatory new form saying that he no longer will have.
Hey, Tom, you're unmuted, Tom. We can hear your whole conversation, brother.
But
Okay, well, he doesn't know. All right, well, this is
He's probably got us.
Right.
All right, here we go. I'm gonna just mute myself.
Exactly.
I did all the special background. Yeah. Gonna go on till 12:30, there's a lot of brand new forms we have to learn and use. I guess everybody can hear me. I've been talking. Some said it said, Tom, you are not on mute. Also, like, there's only 116 people. I had it on unmute. Somebody advised me.
Sign up for a search.
I guess a couple of people commented on it. Yeah, probably my aunt problem.
Talk about how much changes. And then talk about the ants.
Yep.
It's on. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're going to start again. So yeah. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're really pleased to have with us the wonderful John Schroeder, who's going to talk with us just for 5 minutes since he did bring us a delicious lunch. So let's give him our love.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody out there on Zoom can hear me. I was going to tell you a little bit about California balcony laws, SB 721 and SB 326. That's going to wait to another time. Yeah, I may do that after lunch. But for now, I'm just going to pitch my services. I am John Schroeder with the Pillar to Post Home Inspector Schroeder team, for those who don't know me. It's important to know that I am the Schroeder team, and because it's a franchise business, so we want you to work with us and not another franchise. So you need to call us, not the 800 number. Don't go to pillartopost.com. Anyway, moving on. So we have something we call the Ultimate Home Inspection. It utilizes infrared cameras to detect hidden leaks and electrical overheating. This is an example of a leak that you really can't see there on the ceiling until you look at it with an infrared camera. This was a situation where the homeowners had not used their bathtub in a while, and turns out there was a leak. Yeah, let's see, what's next? We also have something we call PTP 360. You're going to see a theme here. A lot of things are called PTP. That's for Pillar to Post, of course. And that is a virtual tour. We use 360 cameras to provide an interactive visual inspection summary. So it's basically a fancy virtual tour with comments and images from the report embedded into it. So you can tour through the home after the inspection and look and see what some of the problems are and where they are. Got a little video here it's pretty much your standard virtual tour, but it's got additional stuff embedded into it. We also have something called PTP Home Manual. It's kind of a digital owner's manual for the home. It gives you recall alerts for any of the appliances or systems, past or future, including the HVAC and the water heater. And it gives you access to user manuals, how-to videos, and various other things. And pretty much anything with a serial number you can add to that. So it's pretty cool. We have something called PTP Estimates. You have the option to request an estimate for repairs based on local rates specific to what's in your report. There's no extra charge for that. That comes with all of our inspections. And it is. Oh, I don't know if it's hyper local. Yeah, but it's based on like basic labor rates and materials costs and so forth for Southern California, I would guess. So we offer some added services such as sewer scoping, pool and spa inspections. We do mold testing, and we also do water quality testing on occasion. So that's it. We feel like we offer a premium service for your clients, and we have a lot of great features that you won't find in most other home inspection companies. So scan the QR code, and we hope to work with you soon.
Good.
Also, John's got some really great flyers out there too. So if you want to take one of those, and he'll be sticking around, have some lunch with him, get to know him. We love having you here. Thanks again for showing up. Yeah.
Okay, so let me get back to our presentation here. We will, let me see, what do we need to do? Stop sharing. There we go. We're getting back. We're getting back. Okay, we are now going to talk about the buyer representation agreement. Now, I have taught this agreement here in this office. I've taught it in Palos Verdes. I've taught it in downtown LA, but that was the old version before the Department of Justice got involved. And in that agreement, it basically said there was still a chance that the seller would pay a cooperating compensation. And now that has been removed. So that is the biggest change here, is the offer. There was a clause that said, hey, Mr. Buyer, you got to pay your broker. However, if it's on the, if there's a seller who's offering cooperating commission, you're off the hook unless there's a difference. That's all gone. So now it reflects the new reality that we've just been discussing for the past hour or so. So let's go through it, and I will once again not go through the agreement line by line, but I will spend a little more time in the residential listing agreement because you're not nearly as familiar with a buyer rep agreement as you are with a listing agreement. So the first thing to keep in mind that it's non-exclusive unless exclusive is checked and initialed. And the biggest difference on non-exclusive means you only get paid if there was broker involvement. And we will talk about what this concept of broker involvement means. With an exclusive buyer rep agreement, you get paid no matter what. In other words, you take the agreement and then you don't do a darn thing later. The buyer buys something, you get paid. Sounds like a good deal. But then you have to convince them to sign that exclusivity element. Before that, you get to sit back and go to the beach and do nothing, okay? I don't recommend that, by the way, in case you're wondering. So, once again, it looks radically different because they reformatted it to fit in with the format that we've seen on the RPA for quite a while now, which is this table thing where the first page or two is when you're filling in the key terms and conditions. So representation period, we need to talk about this. Notice that it's not to exceed 3 months. Once again, yeah.
So weird to me.
Yeah. Guys, I'm the messenger. I'm the messenger. Put down that knife. Put down that knife, okay? Okay. So don't do that. Now, if the buyer is a corporation, LLC, or partnership, it can be more than 3 months. So if it's an individual, and trusts will be treated as individual, just so you know, it has to be 3 months or less. Anything more, or a corporation, LLC, or partnership, okay? So the agreement is automatically non-exclusive unless this box is checked and paragraph 15's initial. It's a lot like, the purchase agreement, where if you don't initial the arbitration clause, you have to go back and negotiate it. So if you check exclusive, but not initial paragraph 15, you don't have a valid agreement because it's unclear whether or not it's exclusive or non-exclusive. So make sure you do that if you're going for exclusive. Property type, pretty straightforward. You mark the type that it is. You can mark more than one. It's okay. I want to back up for a second. Remember that you have to have a buyer representation agreement before you can show a place now. Okay? A lot of your buyers might not want to sign this big, long, involved one. There is a short form, and we'll talk about that next, okay? But this is for a situation where maybe, you already have a relationship with these folks and they're willing to commit to you. A question?
Good question.
Well, that's up to you guys to decide. I think you're going to have a hard time convincing buyers to sign it exclusive because they're so used to being able to bump around a bit. That being said, the non-exclusive is relatively powerful because if you have this agreement and you've shown the person a property and you go and you know, submit an offer, you know, if there's a procuring cause complaint, we still have an obligation, not the binding commitment to pay in the MLS, but we have an ethical duty not to steal clients from each other. And the MLS can enforce the fact that, hey, these people had an agreement. They showed the property to the client first. This other agent came zooming in and disrupted that contractual arrangement. The MLS can still have an arbitration which determines you have to get that commission rather than that other agent who stole from you. That's still out there. Yes.
So to be clear, a buyer doesn't want to commit to a single agent. They sign non-exclusive buyer representation agreements with 3 different agents. They go to an open house by themselves, see the property.
Yeah.
They ask one of the agents about their opinion on the price, right? They email a CMA, right, to them. But they don't decide to use that agent to write the offer. They decide to use one of the other agents with a non-exclusive. Now the agent who prepared the CMA says, well, I was involved with that.
Well,
But there's these competing non-exclusive agreements. Or take it a step further. Let's say the third agent did accompany
let me stop
to
you
the
here,
open
Jason.
house, but didn't do a CMA.
Jason, let me stop you. What you're, no, because it's a valid question, but I got the gist really quick. But in every one of those scenarios, there was an agreement and there was broker involvement. That buyer is now committed to pay 3 separate agents contractually. Right? Because he signed an agreement agreeing to pay.
There's the following specified properties only. Doesn't it have to be written in there?
Well, no, it doesn't have to be a specified property, right? It can just be these types of properties in LA County.
It does say the following specified properties only.
That's it, right?
You don't have to fill that in.
But if you were expecting a commission from a showing, wouldn't you be writing that property in that space?
Not necessarily. If you have a client and you put in, okay, single family, because that is the default, or you can put other ones, so it can be, you know, it can be these other ones. But if you just leave this blank and don't check any boxes, you're showing them single family homes. You check this box to be more specific and say LA County, right? That it's non-exclusive, but they are agreeing per this contract to compensate you if there was broker involvement between you and them on the property they're ultimately buying in LA County. Period. End of story. Later in here, there's language that says, here's how I get paid.
So it sounds
There
like
was broker
non-exclusive
involvement.
is actually worse for the buyer.
That's how you
Well,
fix
they
it.
don't
That's-
have
that's-
great
that's-
buyer
Right,
protection.
you give them a
Yeah. So you get some smart ass buyer who says, oh, I'm going to sign 10 of these. Well, if you use, okay, I got the CMA from one agent. I had another agent write the offer. I had another agent take me to the property. You've just scored 3 broker involvements. You're paying 3 commissions.
Or any property.
It depends how this is filled out. If you filled it out just SFR, check the box and said LA County, boom. If you fill it out for a specific property and he filled it out for a specific property with 3 different agents, and those 3 different agents had broker involvement as defined, which we'll get into, as in I showed it to you, I did a CMA, I took you to it, each one of the 3 agents did something different. That buyer's on the hook for 3 commissions. Technically, yes. True.
We have another,
How much is it?
whatever they agree.
Whatever they put in the
the-
agreement. Okay?
Is KW gonna go after all these buyers that are playing these games?
Well, you're assuming, first of all, that buyers are gonna be playing these games, but
They are gonna be playing, they are gonna be playing.
Buyers play games. That's what they do.
we'll form a SWAT team, guys.
Question, so it's
And
no.
no questions quite yet. Give me a moment here. Guys, guess what? You're gonna have to do some education, aren't you, when you talk to your buyers? Listen, I understand it's not exclusive, but please understand how the payment mechanism triggers. You have an objection. What's the best way to handle objection? Make sure it never comes up. If you sign multiple versions of this and there is broker involvement from multiple brokers on the same property, you are on the legal hook to pay all of them. Tell them this. Fine? If you hit the exclusive, you get paid no matter what. If you can sell the exclusive element to these people and they sign multiple exclusive ones, they're in the toilet the same way. Now they've signed 3 exclusive agreements. In that case, it could get really messy, but
If we're showing anybody a specific property,
Yeah.
they should sign an exclusive agreement for that property with
that's
that.
up to you guys. If that's what you want to do, that's fantastic.
I mean, that's in the buyer or in
And-
the
and wh-
consumer's interest.
And what you can do is you can mark this exclusive. You can put some specific properties here. And as you go to show them more properties, you can amend this agreement to include the additional properties. That is definitely a thing you can do. Yes, Jason? Yeah.
I have a,
Okay.
I'll get to
A
Zoom in just
buyer-
a sec. Let me do this one, then back to Zoom.
A buyer has signed a non-exclusive agreement with an agent to look at properties in LA County.
Yeah.
The buyer has signed an exclusive agreement to look at properties in LA County with an agent.
Yeah.
The buyer comes to the listing agent and wants the listing agent to make the offer. Then they're still obligated to pay on the exclusive agreement, right?
That's correct.
But if they sign a non-exclusive agreement and they want the listing agent to make the offer,
Mm-hmm.
then they're still obligated to pay the
No.
non-exclusive
The
agreement?
non-exclusive agreement is going to be null and void because they have an exclusive agreement with someone else.
So
Well, I mean, it's like with any contract, guys. You sign an exclusive, let's say we're in Hollywood, right? You sign an exclusive agreement with an agent to represent you. Then you go to another agent and sign a non-exclusive agreement for that second agent to represent you. Well, what happens if that second agent lines up a deal for you? The first agent's going to say, I have an exclusive contract to be your agent. I get my commission out of that. And guess what? The court's going to say, you're right.
And
The
the-
exclusive guy, you're getting paid. Non-exclusive guy, guess what? Your contract's null and void because this person was already under contract. It's contract law question.
But how would we know if not for the buyer telling us that they have an exclusive agreement signed with someone else?
Well, that's a
Or
question
just
you're
ask to
gonna
see the
be,
exclusive.
that's a question you're gonna ask every buyer that you're working with. Have you signed an agreement with someone else? And listen to me, please, before making the comments. And then you're gonna write an email that says, we discussed whether you have an agreement with someone else, and you said no. And then you make sure they answer that email. And then later on, if it pops up, they were lying, you now have plenty of legal documentation, and we'll figure out how we're going to enforce these agreements as we go along. I don't have an answer for that yet because it's a new world, guys, and we'll have to figure out how to do that. But these are the ways to, first of all, inform your clients very carefully the difference between exclusive, non-exclusive, and the danger of signing more than one non-exclusive agreement. And B, basically, letting them know that this has to be the way it is because in our settlement, we have to have some agreement signed before we can show you something. You know, we're gonna have to work this out, but you're going straight to the worst case scenario. And your best way to handle it is to educate people very, very carefully about how these things work. And then, you know, most people, if they realize there's a consequence to their slimy behavior, they back off a bit. Yes, question. Oh, we had one on Zoom first. We had a Zoom question that I've been delaying. Your
Yeah.
question on Zoom.
I have a quick, much more simple question, just going back to the expiration. If the 3 months expires, we can just renew with a new agreement for another 3 months, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Those are the questions I like, guys, in case you're wondering. Okay, this one over here.
This one is not as simple.
Yeah.
Sorry. But you know how you're saying some people could be doing slimy behavior.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers think that agents are slimy. So then if we're educating them or not, either way, they could think that they know better. And then they're signing these agreements. Let's say 3 people are not exclusive. How can you prove that, you know, when they buy that property that everybody said they're going to show them in LA County and they find one that, hey, I did this for you. And then this second person you have no idea about did this and then whatever. And then commission has to be paid.
Well, you're going to document what you do, is what you're going to do.
I think this is a fantastic thing to sell an exclusive agreement.
I agree.
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can explain this stuff to them and you're protected
This-
if you just sign this exclusive
this
agreement
is
with
the-
me.
Yeah,
And
this is
it's
the,
a positive for us and it's a positive for them.
yeah. And by the way, one of the, excuse me, one of the objections you might get when you tell them it's an exclusive agreement is, listen, if you want to cancel it because you think I'm doing a lousy job, just notify me in writing and I'll cancel this in 10 days. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, you can start
And-
with a 30-day trial.
And make sure that you have some element of how many days. Because what you don't want is the really slimy buyer going into an open house with an exclusive agreement. They love the listing agent. The listing agent tells them it's the only way they're going to get it, so they can cancel their exclusive agreement immediately and write the offer. So you want a time period on it. But hey, if I'm a lousy agent, all you have to do is cancel within X amount, give me written notification, and you're free after 10 days or 15 days, whatever. And by the way, I am so good at what I do in representing buyers, and you're going to be so happy with my service. I've never had one buyer ask to cancel. And that's the pitch I've used to get buyer rep agreements sold for signed for 20 years. And it handles that objection well. And if you have the confidence behind what you're saying while you're saying it, these guys buy confidence when they hire a realtor, and you get it done.
Yeah, and
Okay.
set your boundaries too as a business professional. If somebody's willing to not work with you exclusively, ask yourself if you're willing to work with them in that way too. Maybe go find someone who will work with you exclusively.
That's always my approach. I just don't want to work with. you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, it's whichever agreement gets signed first, right? So if the
If-
non-exclusive gets signed first, you can't, the exclusive agreement doesn't.
If
trump
you
the
have a
non-exclusive.
non-exclusive agreement, you can sign an exclusive agreement, right?
You can?
Because, well, the first agreement's not exclusive. But that exclusive agreement can't be for the exact same terms as the non-exclusive.
Like
It can
what's-
be exclusive. For example, you can sign a
For the same-
non-exclusive for SFRs in LA County, and then you can go sign a agreement with another agent for multifamily residential in LA County. Those agreements do not conflict.
Yeah, but can you sign a non-exclusive agreement with an agent for a specific property and then an exclusive agreement with the listing agent of that specific property after that?
You could, but,
Oh, so-
but if the agent with the non-exclusive agreement had broker involvement on the property, and we'll talk about what that is, that buyer is going to owe 2 people a commission.
Oh, so he will still owe the non-exclusive?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Stay involved.
Yeah. And a lot of this is basic contract law, which, you know, we have to.
How do you think
getting buyers-
getting buyers to pay 2 or 3 commissions is going to lead to another lawsuit and settlement?
Well, that's not,
Kevin, for the next year, I promise you.
well, you know, that's not gonna be a NAR lawsuit, you know, that's gonna be buyer's problem, because we are going to go through the buyer compensation advisory with them. We are going to educate them about what this agreement means. And every time you educate them, you're gonna write emails saying, we discussed the contract, you understand how it's paid, you understand the risks of signing more than one agreement, and you sign this with me. And by the way, do you want to go out Friday and look for properties? Yes, I do want to look for properties Friday. Oh, they replied, they read the email. And then someone tries to sue you and you whip out that email, and it's pretty hard for them to say, well, I didn't understand what I was signing. Well, gosh, why did you reply, you know, to this long email discussing what happened that day you signed it? And you replied to it, so you obviously saw the email and you're still trying to sue? Good luck.
This is gonna make buyers hate agency more.
No, or they'll make them love you. It's a mindset. Moving on.
Yeah,
moving on.
well,
It's a mindset, don't-
and it is a mindset, but, you know, the thing is we can blame the NAR settlement for this. Say, guys, we have no choice. And it's going to be California law. It's going to be California law.
If you don't have a contract, you're unemployed anyway. Why are you out on the street showing people homes without a contract?
Renee, on January 1, in California, it's going to be law. You have to have buyer rep agreement. So it's not only going to be the NAR
States
settlement.
and other countries have been doing this all the time. We're just like in another bubble out here.
Yeah.
So you'll see people from other states and other countries that won't even balk at this because they're like, oh yeah, I had to pay my agent in Paris, you know, like.
So we can't say right now that it's legally.
Well, we can say it's legally per the NAR settlement. We can't say it's California law.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Which is true. And the Department of Justice wants these as well. So other than that, there's nothing forcing us to do it. Okay. You have to be specific on a property type, but they put in a default. It's SFR. And unless you check this box, SFR is included. And then you put either a specific location or a county or some cities. Okay? So specified properties here or counties and cities. Even though there's a light version of this, if I'm just showing one property, I might even try and get this signed and check the box and put the one property. But that's up to you guys to decide. Okay? But you gotta make sure you don't leave the whole thing, one of these 3 blank. You have to have at least one of these 3 and make sure it's relatively specific. Don't list every county in California. That might be a bit of a problem. Don't list, you know, every city in California. Limit it to about 7 or 8 is what the risk management people are saying. They want, if there is a dispute, you want to be able to say the agreement was relatively specific. Like, you know, I used to see buyer rep agreements that sign any single family property, you know, no state, no county, no nothing. Okay. Okay. Then what's next? If you want, and this might be a way of having a more in-depth conversation with a buyer, you can check this box and include the CAR form BIPP, Buyer Identification of Preferences and Priorities. I don't think I included this in our packet, but what it basically is a questionnaire. Do you like 2-story homes? How many square feet do you need? How many bedrooms and bathrooms? Do you like pools? Blah, blah, blah. So it's not something that creates a contractual obligation, but it's a way of getting more in depth with your buyer about what they want. And I see it as more of a relationship enhancement tool. and I'm not sure if I'll use it or not, but, you know, it basically, if there is a dispute about broker involvement down the road and you have one of these filled out, in addition to the other things, it's going to be pretty hard to say that you weren't deeply involved with that buyer. So it's kind of a cover your ass for.
Quick question. If you check that box for the bid.
Yeah.
And they put in, for example, they want a pool.
Mhm.
And the house that doesn't have a pool, does that mean they now don't have to pay you the commission?
It
Because
doesn't create a contractual obligation. It's more of an advisory rather than a commitment that this is the house we will buy.
okay.
Okay? Okay. And then you can exclude some properties for representation. So you can talk to a buyer and say, hey, you told me you signed some other non-exclusive agreements. Were they for specific properties? Okay, let's exclude them from this agreement so you don't end up having to pay a broker twice. See what nice people we are? We're trying to make sure you don't get in legal trouble. Okay. Oh, you signed an exclusive agreement for a specific property, but you want a non-exclusive agreement with me to go see properties other than that specific property. So now you're going to type in, you're going to exclude that one property that you have the specific exclusive agreement for. And I think a lot of agents will not know these complexities, and this will give you an advantage having been through some of this, okay? The next thing is the standard statement that says that real estate commissions are not fixed by law. And they're gonna make that bigger every time. And then the CARB BCA form, once again, can be your guide to walking them through how this now works. Now, super important right here, super important. Amount of compensation. If you don't fill anything in here, you don't have a valid agreement and you're not getting paid. So guess what? Fill something in here. So how much commission should you get paid? Whatever amount you think makes sense.
Am I correct to say that if you agree to 2% and the seller is willing to give you 3%, that you can only accept 2%?
You are correct.
So put the max.
The most you can get, okay?
What if the seller only pays 2%, but the buyer committed 3%, it's not paid?
Then
buyer
you
has to
can
pay you.
then you can check the box in paragraph 3G3 of the RPA asking for the seller to pay the difference.
And if they don't, then the buyer is on the hook to pay you.
Then the buyer's
Right.
on the hook to pay you. It's correct.
Tell them to go talk to the DOJ and all the lawyers who made $500 million blowing hot air.
Questions?
Require the additional.
Yes, you can always you modify the contract. No, you
No,
amend this-
your contract with them, I would
Yeah.
use the modification of terms. We saw a listing agreement one, you can just make one for a buyer agreement, like if you've been working with them for a while, the seller's only willing
Yeah.
to give you 2%, they're on the hook for the other half, like you can just give it back to them probably. with the
Yeah,
modification
but let me make a clarification there. The modification of terms form is for listings only. You would amend this agreement,
Mhm.
okay?
And then-
Compensation in paragraph, 4E1B shall be XYZ. Yeah, amendment, and you're amending the agreement, yes.
I'm sure that we may face certain buyers that say, hey, look, I can't afford to pay you the 2.5%, whatever it's going to be.
Mhm.
But if you are able to get the seller to pay for your commission, I'm willing to purchase the house. So in that scenario, if we're willing to work with somebody on the chance that the seller will pay for the commission, we would have to put down 0 here.
Put 0.
Okay, well, no, but I'm saying, how do we then navigate?
Put 2.5%, and then you ask the seller to pay, and whatever the seller is willing to give you, you go back and amend this so that the buyer's off the hook for the rest, and you have to work with whatever the seller.
Well, and the other thing is that I would tell the buyers is you can call the listing agent, right? Before you show the property and say, hey, listen, I got a buyer here and he's only going to buy a house where the seller is going to pay his obligation to pay his broker. Is it worth me showing your house?
And but we still can't ask specifics on what they're willing to pay.
Well, you could, my agreement says 2.5%. You can say what your agreement is.
Okay.
Right.
And is it worthwhile? You don't even have to say that. Here's the agreement I have in writing. What's wrong with that? Nothing. And then if that guy says, yeah, we're definitely looking at that, or no, my guy's not going to pay it at all, don't show the house.
Yeah, I think that's the better way to go, because if we are then just writing contracts in hopes that they're going to pay that commission and the seller has no intention to, then we have to also, as listing agents, then counter things back, and it's a pain in the butt to have to counter somebody that's not going to pay.
I agree.
So I think.
So that.
Like the listing agents, buyer, we're all just gonna have to communicate.
And remember, there will be a field in the MLS that says at the very least that the seller is willing to pay a concession. So you have a conversation with your buyer. So, hey, if it doesn't say in the MLS that the seller's willing to pay concessions, is it okay for me to ask the listing agents if their client is open to paying the buyer's obligation? And if they say no, we're not going to see that property. And if the buyer says yes, that's how I want you to proceed. Get that in an email, make sure they've seen it, and now you have a specific instruction for your client. Don't show me houses where there's no indication that the listing agent is willing to pay my obligation to pay you. Okay? I think that's the way to go, because I ain't working for free. Yes. It's just using the language that I just gave you right now. That's why I say. But no, but that's all legal. It's like, there's nothing legal to call the listing agent and say, hey, listen, I have a buyer's broker agreement that's paying 2.5%. Is it worthwhile for me to submit an offer asking for your seller to pay that? And if the guy says, no way, he's not going to pay it, fine, I've been instructed by my buyer not to show that type of property. Off you go. Okay? That's what I plan to do.
And if they say the seller's willing to pay some, then you'll know, not 2.5%.
Yeah. You will. Yeah. But some buyers might be willing to pay the difference too. The seller.
They have contracts and the buyer picks up the difference. They're just, they know they have to, and they want to work with that agent, and they pick up the difference.
So I have a question. If this market turns into more of a buyer's market and there's a lot of desperate sellers out there, why can't we as buyer's agents say, we're charging 3% and we're bringing you the buyer. Do you want to sell your house or not?
Yeah, it's a market condition that allows you to do that sort of thing. Now, we do have to move on, or we're not going to get through this one, okay? Yeah, guys, if you have a question on Zoom, you need to just scream and say, hey, I have a question, okay?
Okay, I have a question.
Okay, what is it, Michelle?
Okay, in 4B, where it says or see attached compensation schedule, can't you define that? I'm assuming that's kind of like an addendum. Can't you define if the seller's open to giving this, then we'll get this. If he's willing to give that, we'll get that. And just explain.
No, it has to be a very specific formula. So I would basically put in an amount of compensation here and then have that conversation on, what do we do if the seller's not willing to pay compensation? The lawsuit was very specific on that. It can't be an open-ended amount. So if you're gonna do something like that, there would have to be a very, very specific formula that met the standard that came out of that NAR settlement. So I don't recommend doing that.
I have a question. It's Jan.
Yes.
What do you think of when you're talking to a buyer and we'll say 2.5%, whatever, and they are reluctant to make a commitment for this, say, a 3-month period, that somehow they're going to have to pay this money. If you explain to them, this only happens if you enter a contract and the purchase closes, we'll still be negotiating with the other side in our offer. And if you can't come to an agreement because of that, then you're not committed because you're not buying the property.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And it's fine to discuss that with your buyer. Okay.
Hey, Jeff, I have a question real quick. It's Kathy. So let's say that the seller is not paying the commission and the buyer agrees to pay the commission. And for whatever reason, maybe you had a falling out with the buyer. When it comes time for the buyer to bring in their closing costs, they said, well, this agent hasn't really worked for me, whatever. And he does not bring in the money to pay the commission at closing. Does the escrow still close?
In all likelihood, not, because this is a demand that we put in escrow, and escrow can't close a deal when there is a demand with a party with a valid contract that should be paid. Trust me, as broker, I've run into situations where escrow has received a demand to pay a commission from an attorney in the middle of a commission dispute, and that deal hasn't closed until that dispute has been settled. So, Kath, it could get ugly, and I'm sure those situations will pop up, but you'll have a strong legal basis for making sure the deal doesn't close until they pay you your commission, okay? I've had sellers try and withhold commission, and of course the brokerage has made a demand and we got our commission. So it's going to happen the same way the other way around. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So payments. Yes.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. I know we want to get out of here, but I'm a little confused. It's a lot of information, so I'm trying to, take it all in. But I do got a question real quick. So with this buyer representation agreement, if I'm doing an open house and they need to bring this particular document so that I know they have.
No, we'll talk about open houses in a couple of minutes. They do not have to have a buyer rep agreement to come to open house. There's a different thing happens there. I'll let you know. Okay. If we have time. Okay. So payments received by broker from seller or others. If broker receives compensation from seller or others for broker's representation of the buyer, the amount shall be credited against the buyer's obligation to pay broker. This is the 3G3 situation. That's the only way that we can be receiving compensation from seller. If it's a concession, that money's going to the buyer, not us directly. Okay? And we cannot receive any amount in excess of paragraph T2E1. Make sure to plug a number in 2E1, guys. Okay. And just like the listing agreement, if we do get canceled, we can submit a list of properties that we had broker involvement with that buyer. And we can say if they submit an offer on one of those properties for, let's say, 30 days after the representation period ends, then we still get paid because we had broker involvement and we have a valid comp agreement. On the seller side, in the listing agreement, someone told me once, oh, I've never seen anyone collect on that. Well, I've seen it happen 12, 15 times, and I've been, the broker of record, and we've gone after sellers for that, and we've collected. went to mediation and they got a surprise of their life when the mediator told them, if this goes to arbitration, you're going to lose. And then they paid us. Okay. Cancellation rights notice. Now, this is important. If it's non-exclusive, cancellation effective upon receipt, or you can check a box and say no. If you cancel, it's 10 days. And if I do a non-exclusive, I'm going to plug in a number here. I don't want them to be able to get out free just like that. You know, I want there to be a time period. It's if exclusive, it's a 30 days after receipt. So the buyer can cancel, but it's 30 days. And you can amend this. You can have an amendment to the agreement in other terms to say, no, cancellation period's longer. They didn't give you an option to do it here, but there's nothing under the law that says you can't make it longer. Okay?
What are you recommending for non-exclusive?
You know, for non-exclusive, I'm going to put 10 or 15 days personally and see how that works out. Now, the one scenario I am concerned about personally in my sales business is the open house scenario, because we all know what happens at some agents at open houses. So I want there to be some time period so you don't get the immediate cancellation. All of a sudden they're writing with the other agent. Now, this continued right to payment for broker-involved property should protect you against that to a degree, but I like belt and suspenders. You know. Okay.
And these are calendar days. So.
That's correct. Okay. Now there is a new form which we'll look at, which is a buyer financial personal information form. And it, you know, unless the box, and basically it's saying that they have to give us personal financial information to show that they have the funds to do a deal. Remember, we always used to have to nag them for all that stuff. And now it's part of the agreements. Because why, if we have to sign these buyer rep agreements, and before we show them anything, we got to make sure they're qualified, right? So CAR's trying to protect you by making them expose to you their financial info before you spend a bunch of time running around showing someone something. No, it's not. The box is if you want it's like a pre-approval layer that says within 5 days you're going to provide the pre-approval layer, or a box, oh, it's already attached. Same thing. So there is a form, CAR form, BFPI. We'll go over that in a moment. Now, you can remember we had that thing where we said, you know, we can talk to the buyer and say, only show me properties where the seller's willing to pay something. We can even check this box. And this should comfort some of those buyers, right? Say, hey, check this box. And then I have, you know, check this box, and then I'm not going to show you properties where the seller's not going to comp. So this should be kind of a safety valve for some buyers who are worried about signing this agreement. Okay?
So are you talking about G2 or G1?
G2.
G2.
Yeah. And then buyer intends to purchase. This might come out because now the VA can pay us. They're still negotiating whether FHA clients can pay us. But I think it's going to come around where the lending industry will change and both of those buyers will be able to pay us. Because those are the only two loan products in question, and the VA question's been solved already. Okay. Did we miss pages? Oh, we missed pages again. Oh. Does someone have a hard copy of a buyer agreement here? I think, by the way, just to get Rhea off the hook here, I think I sent her the wrong thing. I think I had a 2-page copy that I scanned, and I only did one side scanning. So, yes, I will show you the place on the CAR website before we are done today. Yeah. So On page 2, the first thing, it says number 3, broker compensation advisory, car form BCA. So that broker comp advisory that we talked about already is included. Even though that form is included, paragraph 4 of this agreement goes into excruciating detail about how we get paid. And the big thing is for non-exclusive representation, we only get paid when there was broker involvement with the property. Okay? Now, what is broker involvement? And on the old agreement, it went through that in a lot of detail. And on this agreement, it doesn't go into that detail like it should. Maybe it's somewhere else, but I'm not seeing it. Now, what broker involvement is we exposed the property to them. We sent them an email saying, hey, check out this property. Now, that can't be auto drip, by the way. It has to be an email for that specific property. That's one form of broker involvement. We did a CMA on the property, broker involvement. We took them to see the property, broker involvement. We analyzed the property for them. We got on the internet and went through a virtual tour with them on the property. There are other elements of broker involvement, but you get the gist of it. You wrote the offer, that's broker involvement. It's not hard to do broker involvement, right? It's pretty easy, but you have to be able to establish that. So I'm recommending that you do this stuff through email rather than text, because it's a lot easier to hang on to emails, okay? Now, if it's exclusive representation and we've checked all the right boxes, broker involvement is not required. So you sign the agreement, you have exclusive, they buy something within the specifications, they're paying you. Oh, here's the broker involvement thing. Buyer physically entered and was shown the property by broker. Broker showed the property to the buyer virtually. Broker submitted the seller a signed written offer. Broker performed a market analysis. The property is introduced by broker to buyer by broker, or one for which broker acted on buyer's behalf. Acting on buyer's behalf can be calling up the listing agent and asking them questions about the property. However, merely sending a buyer a list of properties shall not be deemed broker involvement without documented action on the part of broker analyzing the property for buyer, specifically, or assisting buyer in the potential acquisition, or communicating with seller or seller's agent regarding potential acquisition of the property. Okay, so it's pretty clear what broker involvement is, right? I think the short phrase for broker involvement is doing your damn job. Okay. 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 And then continuation of right to compensation. It's the same thing about, that safe clause for if the deal cancels. How we get paid upon completion of any resulting transaction and through escrow, we're entitled to compensation where any, we get paid if acquisition, we also get paid if acquisition is prevented by default of buyer or upon buyer's default. And so we get paid payment through escrow. Here's the one that the internet question is really going to like, is buyer hereby irrevocably assigns the broker the compensation provided for in this agreement from buyer's funds in escrow. So remember, if they refuse to do it, then we issue a demand escrow showing this contract that said the buyer agreed to pay us in escrow, and escrow will not close because of that demand. Okay? That's a good thing. Buyer agrees to submit to escrow any funds needed to compensate broker under this agreement. Broker may submit this agreement as instructions to compensate broker to any escrow regarding property involving buyer and seller or other transferor. So that's our protection. Will some nasty buyers try it? Of course they will. But this is our, our backstop, okay?
Can I ask a question on this, Jeff?
You certainly can.
There's a line in this agreement that says the buyer does not have the funds, and essentially that we would be trying to get the funds out of the seller. If that line is checked, would it negate what you just said?
It will not, because we're not going to go to escrow with that buyer, because with that buyer, we're going to submit every offer with paragraph 3G3 of the agreement signed, or we're going to get a concession from the seller. Otherwise, we're not going to have an agreement because the buyer can't pay. So you're just not going to enter into that type of agreement so we don't create that conflict.
Right, I understand that, but I guess my question is with this whole exclusive, non-exclusive thing, if you're basically saying there was broker involvement, you went and bought it with a different agent or with a listing agent or whatever, but there was broker involvement, so I'm gonna submit my demand to escrow. I personally don't think this is good business, but say somebody did it, and we would have to warn our clients that somebody could do it. That's the situation where I'm asking if checking the box that says I don't have the money would
That's
negate
not, if for some reason the buyer then signs an escrow that doesn't get them compensated, that box is not a get out of jail. That box doesn't say that this relieves my obligation to pay broker in the case that I go ahead and commit to a deal where I don't, that doesn't pay you. No, that would not fly. But, the key thing is, even if they go to someone else, that deal's going to include some sort of commitment to pay that other broker, because the buyer doesn't have the money. So there'll be money to chase after in that situation, is my suspicion. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to page 3, which we do have on the screen. So this is let me preface what you see on the screen where it says B here. 5, this is B of number 5, and number 5 is cancellation of buyer representation agreement. And it says either buyer or broker may cancel this agreement by giving written notice at any time to the other one within the time specified in paragraph 2F. That's where they talked about cancellation. And then, of course, we get compensated if a property gets purchased that's in our continuation period after the expiration, and there was broker involvement on that property. Now, just like the listing agreement, we have to submit a written list of properties for which there was broker involvement within 5 days, calendar days after the day of cancellation. So they cancel the agreement. You have 5 days to get them a list of properties of which there was broker involvement. And then you give it to them. And if your period was 60 days, if they end up buying one of those properties within 60 days, you still get paid. Okay?
Yeah, but I remember you telling me a couple of years ago that most agents never do that.
Most agents never do that. They don't fill in the box for the time period, and they never submit the list.
Yeah.
Now, I think they're crazy. But as I said, I've been involved in 10 or 12 cases on the listing side where the listing agent actually did do it, followed all the rules. The seller ended up selling to someone on the exclusion list, tried not to pay us, and we were able to get paid. So, it's good. Okay. Agency relationships. It's our standard deal. Notice that we have to have car form AD signed and also car form PRBS signed with the buyer. When you hit buyer rep agreement in zip forms, those two agency disclosure forms are attached, just like the listing agreement, just like the RPA. So it's the standard agency disclosure we all know and love. Okay? Now, we did have some questions about people signing more than one non-exclusive agreement. Here's another educational opportunity to tell your buyers why they are not being the nicest people in the world when they do things like that. And that's me being nice. So advisory regarding buyers signing multiple representation agreements. Buyer shall inform broker in writing if buyer has signed any other buyer representation agreements, where exclusive or non-exclusive, with any other broker for any property described in paragraph 2B. So it can be for a different type of property. They don't have to tell you. For example, they signed up with someone else for multifamily, but you for SFR. Okay, buyer shall disclose to broker if another broker showed buyer such property virtually in person or wrote offer. In other words, was there broker involvement? If there was, buyer may owe compensation to that broker if buyer purchased such property. In other words, you might be hit for both me and you, Mr. Buyer. If buyer has signed an exclusive buyer rep agreement with their broker that has not expired or terminated, buyer may owe compensation to that broker if buyer such property, even if that broker had no involvement with the property. So in other words, Mr. Buyer, be careful about what you're signing. And for us guys, I think we need to be very, very clear when we're getting these signed. Hey guy, Mr. Buyer, I want to make sure you don't get yourself in a pickle. And I know I said it that way, but we also have a hidden meaning, and don't get my life complicated either. But it's all about them, right? And the guy thinks he's being really cute signing multiple agreements. What he really is getting himself in a pickle. So we're protecting them from themselves to a degree, and we're making sure we're not getting in a messy situation either.
Say I signed an open house sheet. Does that count?
It does not.
We have to.
It absolutely does not, and I'll show you why in a minute. Yes.
Thank you, Jeff. And it says buyer may owe compensation to that broker. Is that like the same amount to each broker, or it's kind of like equal?
It all
whatever?
depends what's in
Right.
that other agreement. We don't know what's in the other agreement. In the other agreement, they might have said they're paying that guy 10%, and they're only paying you 2.5%.
Okay, so it all adds up.
If that's the case, why didn't you hold out for an extra 7.5? No, but no, yeah, it all depends what's in the other agreement. Okay. Yes.
Paragraph 2B, where it says location,
Mhm.
it offers you could check a box for county, or you can
Yeah.
check a box for city.
You're right. Or specific property. Yeah.
Well, that specific property.
Oh, it's above. Yeah, that's right.
So they're two different things.
Yeah.
So regarding the location,
Mhm.
if those city and county boxes are not checked and those lines are left blank, what does that do to the form? Does that mean you
don't
represent
have
them
a valid
anything?
agreement.
You don't have a valid, so you
It's not
must have.
specific enough to be an enforceable agreement.
So but you could just check the county box and say Los Angeles.
Yes.
And then you would be covered for any property within Los Angeles County,
That's
or
correct.
not just unincorporated Los Angeles County?
No, that's the whole county.
Any city located within Los Angeles County.
correct.
And you don't have to name the cities then?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Conflicts with other broker. I mean, this is the most worthless paragraph I've ever seen because we never have conflicts with other brokers, right? Oh, sorry. Okay, unless otherwise notified by buyer, buyer acknowledges that for the property identified in paragraph 2B, excluding any property specified in paragraph 2D, which is an exclusion, buyer has not entered into an exclusive representation agreement with another broker, has no obligation, even under a non-exclusive representation agreement, to pay compensation to any other broker arising out of the acquisition of the property. So all the concerns we raised earlier in our discussions are 100% valid. Don't get me wrong. But these are some protections. And remember, I said during that earlier discussion, we got educate, educate, educate. This is your tool. Use it, right? Okay. And there's a, it's a, the big thing is, whether or not the property is identified in 2B. So the question is to be or not to be. Okay. Sorry, that's the worst dad joke I could think of, spur of the moment, but it came. Yeah. Yeah. If you can't put Shakespeare into the class, it's not worth having. Okay. So limitation on broker representation. If a property is excluded in paragraph D, 2D, during the time buyer is obligated to compensate another broker, broker is not obligated to assist the buyer with respect to that property. So in other words, they said, hey, you know what? For this property on the Bird Streets, I got some other guy under agreement for it. And then they end up buying it and they say, hey, can you help me with it? I'm not getting paid. And it says right here in the agreement, I don't have to help you. Goodbye. Okay. You might want to be less smart ass about it, but that's your no obligation. Yeah.
Tell me how you think buyers are gonna feel about
Yeah. Pardon?
How do you think buyers are gonna feel about all this? I know how I would feel if I was a buyer.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I just know this is the way it has to be. So I'm going to have to manage my buyer's feelings as best as possible and get these things signed. Okay? Yes.
Way back when, it was always practice. These are some changes now, but there was always the practice of using this agreement years gone by. Now, I think also the public is being educated. I mean, you can't turn on the news without seeing some of this. So buyers are already on notice to some degree that they are going to be on the hook.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going to be our job. Now, I need to get through this agreement. We're at 12:20. We're going to probably run 10 or 15 minutes over, but I will stay for questions because I'm trying as best as possible to do this. This 8 is no different than the old agreement. It just says what we're going to do for them. It says the buyer's going to act in good faith, and they're also going to get us that buyer financial information. Then we go to page 4, which is not on the screen, and I apologize profusely. I do have page 4 here in my hand, and you can trust me that yeah, trust me, I'm a realtor. It's really just the nuts and bolts of, dispute resolution, is mediation. We're going to offer reasonable care and professional assistance, attorney's fees if there's a lawsuit, management approval. Management has the right to reject this agreement. The buyer is asserting they have the authority to sign the agreement, and this agreement's the entire understanding between buyer and agent. So it's really the housekeeping provisions, nothing different. Then here, remember it said in the exclusive representation, if that box is checked, that this paragraph has to be initialed. So basically it's a warning. It's an exclusive agreement, and buyer shall not enter into another representation of agreement in conflict with this agreement. And we're entitled to compensation if they buy anything during the representation period, even if another broker is entitled to be paid. And then either party can cancel with 30 days written notice. And then we have that list of properties clause repeated again. Okay. And then the buyer initials. Now, 16, confirmation of compensation. I know in 2B, we said the compensation was going to be this much, but we've been accused of not being transparent and clear about compensation. So, Mr. Buyer, belt and suspenders, we're going to restate the compensation again so that there can't be any, or it's 2E1, excuse me. There's going to be no confusion about how much we're getting paid. Do me a favor, make sure it gets filled out. Make sure it's the exact same compensation in 2E and here. Because if there's conflict and then there's a dispute later on, you're going to have trouble getting your money.
Do you think zip forms is gonna auto-populate like these spaces?
It would be awful nice if they did. That would be a great upgrade for that. Yeah, okay? And then,
Steph, can you give us an example, which we've kind of glossed over in both of these, on the, or specified in the attached compensation schedule? Because I know there's people that are gonna write in whatever the seller is offering, and I also know they can't.
yeah, well, you know, my advice is don't use it. There's, commercial agents might use it because they do have some very complex formulas about how they get paid on certain types of properties. But for residential agents, don't use it. I mean, just go with the flat commission, because anything that you write is likely to violate the NAR settlement agreement about having a very specific formula about how you get paid. And it's going to be extremely confusing to explain to your buyer anyway. You know, if it's a full moon in August and it's a single family house in Calabasas with 5 bedrooms and 3 baths, I get 2.2% commission. But if it's a condo in Tarzana with only 1 bed, 1 bath, I get this much. I mean, it's going to be, don't do it. Just go with the straight number. So it's just like the increased deposit field on the RPA. You don't need it for a residential deal. Don't use it. And that's, if you really think you need to have an attached compensation schedule, I beg you to run it by me first to make sure it's enforceable and that it complies with the NAR settlement agreement. And if I don't know it, I'll show it to a lawyer. Okay.
And my understanding is also one of the reasons this is repeated is because when you check the box in the RPA, this is the page that you have to send to prove that you have that agreement with your buyer.
That could be the case. This, I'm trying to remember what that, there's a form that gets submitted when you submit 3G3, and it's possible that form specifies this page gets delivered. I don't know that for sure, but I wouldn't be shocked that that's the case.
That's not the page that gets delivered.
It was something about the last page of the agreement. That's why I thought maybe this was the last page.
No, you might be right. You might be right. I've gotten deep into all this, but I don't have every answer yet. But to me, it makes sense because there's a form you submit along with 3G3 that details what what the buyer's obligation is under their buyer rep agreement, and attaching something like this makes a ton of sense because it gives the compensation number but doesn't detail the other terms and conditions. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
I have a quick question. On
Good.
16, is it enough just to put 3% or 2.5% and then leave it?
Yeah, all
Okay.
you have to check the box.
That's what I wanted.
Whatever percentage, yeah. Okay. So there's a short form of this agreement. And CAR's recommending that we use this when you're just showing one property to a client you might not know that well. I'm thinking sign call. Hey, I saw your listing. I want to see it. But I'm not necessarily willing to commit, you know, for you to be my buyer's agent forever, right? So you can use this short form to say, basically show me this one property or these 3 properties. We agree to give you a tour of the property. You give us the non-exclusive right to represent you in acquiring the property. Term of representation is only 30 days for this one. So you can make it for 1 day, right? So I'm only going to show you today. You know, if you don't like me, it expires. There's no continuation clause in this one. So it's a one and done thing. And, you know, the amount of compensation, same deal. You don't fill anything in. You don't have a deal. Same deal that if you end up writing an offer for these people, you can do the 3G3 thing. Same language about how compensation is paid. By the way, this was exactly what was on one of the pages the even pages that we didn't see on the regular buyer rep agreement about broker involvement and all that stuff. They sign, you sign, you're done. Now, I think this, or no, there is a page 2 to this. When you guys have a page 2? I wish it was just you sign, you're done. You guys are saving my butt over there. Someone has to on a regular basis. So page 2, yeah, it's just the terms of compensation, payment through escrow, accounting for payments if broker is paid, all the same stuff from the other buyer's broker agreement. And then either party can cancel by giving written notice. But guys, you know, if it's a 1 or 2 day agreement, there's not going to be a lot of cancellations, right? And then the agency relationships, this will come with a CAR Form AD and a PRBS. And then there is a clause in here that says prospective buyers attending an open house without representation. You are not required to sign a representation agreement to see this property on open house. So people can see an open house without signing a rep agreement. If you don't want the agent holding the open house to represent you, then you should not sign this form. So in other words, they don't want agents misusing the form. And you should read and understand the open house visitor non-agency disclosure and sign-in form. That's the form we want them to sign at the open house. All prospective buyers, if you already have a signed representation agreement with another broker, you inform the broker of the name of that other broker and provide a copy of that agreement to broker or request broker to obtain a copy from the other broker. If you have already signed a representation agreement with another broker and you sign this form, you may be obligated to pay 2 different brokers if you purchase this property. So it's a much shorter form. One thing that this brings up, guys, what if someone calls you up and says, I have another broker, I have a buyer rep agreement, I want to come see this house. You can either say, well, have your broker call and make an appointment, or you can say, fine, I can show it to you, but you have to show me a copy of that broker rep agreement because I'm not allowed to show this property to anyone who hasn't signed a broker rep agreement with another agent. I think the preferred mode, and what I would do, call your agent and make an appointment. Okay, or come to one of the open houses. Frank, you have a question.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused if you're the listing agent and somebody calls you, they want to see the house and they don't want representation. What, they still have to sign something, right? And what do they need to sign?
I would call that an open house, maybe a one-off open house, and have them sign the open house non-agency agreement.
Okay, so we'd consider that an open house, even though it's a showing.
I think we're gonna, you know, I don't know how else to do that. If you get someone to call, say, I absolutely refuse to sign this. Then I think the fallback is the open house and say, I have open house between 3 and 3:10 p.m. And I didn't advertise it anywhere and just one person showed up. I don't know what else to do at this point. Okay.
What if you have a lot of people showing up at an open house? How are you getting all of these different people to sign these forms?
How often, how do you get people? There's only one form you have to sign for open house. We'll get to that in a minute. But in the open house forms, you'll see that I don't think it's going to be that hard. So let me get there. Okay. Buyer financial and personal information. I'm not going to cover this form in much detail at all. It's very self-explanatory. It's basically all the stuff that, you know, how much do you have for deposit? How much do you have for down payment? Do you have funds for broker compensation? What's your maximum loan amount? If you have a lender, fill in that information, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, so that, and then it asks you some personal information, whether you own a house, then they sign it. Okay. It really is just a one pager. This one is self-explanatory. There's nothing wacky and wild here. What this allows you to do is qualify your buyer. If they come up here and say, I want to buy a house for $1 million, I have $20K for down payment, I have $14K in the bank, when can we go see it? You can say, gee, based on this form, never, you know, right? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
you know, what I'm accustomed to do as a listing agent is requiring a letter of pre-approval from someone before showing a property. Can we
Yeah.
still do that instead of this form?
Well, this is for buyer's reps, that form we just saw, but you know,
But even if we're representing a buyer, could we-
listen to me for a sec here. That's the seller's requirement, not your requirement. Right?
Right.
Thank you. Remember, we don't have requirements, the clients do. And the client can set any requirement they want as long as it complies with fair housing in regard to making their house available to people. That hasn't changed. But be very careful. Sometimes when sellers have requirements, they are either purposely or inadvertently violating fair housing. I had my first year in real estate, client said, do not show this listing to any black people. My neighbors will hate me. It's like, you know, this is like 2001. What planet are you from? And I basically said, I'm sorry, I can't list your house. But, you know, so be very careful when they say, and if you're suggesting requirements for them, because I have a feeling you suggest this to your seller, which is okay, you can do that. Make sure your suggestions are complying with fair housing, okay? Because I feel really strongly about that. I think almost everyone in these rooms do, but we can do it accidentally as well. So make sure you're being careful. Okay.
And you were correct just a few moments ago, because it does say in there, agent is holding an open house or conducting an in-person or live virtual tour. So
Good.
this would absolutely be the thing that they would sign.
I'm lucky I got one right. Okay. Okay, so this is the form that you're going to want everyone to sign at open house. You're going to fill out this form here, okay? And under agent, that's going to be your name. And under broker, just put, you know, Keller Williams, whatever Keller Williams you're with, okay? And all it's telling the buyer is that agents holding an open house are conducting in-person or live virtual tours, as Frank noticed. He read ahead. Visitors interested in viewing the property, agent agrees to show the property on the following terms and conditions. We don't represent you. Any communication we have with you is for the benefit of the seller. Communication with agents are not confidential. Anything you tell me, I can tell the seller. If you write an offer, at that time, we'll disclose if agent or agent's broker represent the seller exclusively or both the seller and the visitor. If you want to be represented by an agent, you're going to either have to sign CAR Form PSRA or a buyer rep agreement. If you're in exclusive relationship with another agent, this is not intended as a solicitation of visit. Okay? And then it looks like an open house log here, right? So instead of having the standard open house log, I'm going to have about 5 or 6 of these printed out. When one gets filled up, I go to the next one. And when people come in, I'm going to say, well, gosh, guys, you know, there was just this huge settlement between the National Association of Realtors. And according to that, we have to follow new rules now. And I'm afraid we have to have this for every visitor that comes in. Nothing I can do about it. It's a legal requirement. And I really would appreciate your understanding of this. And, you know, since we said it's something legal, they might even fill in the email and phone correctly, right? And that, you know, might be a better way to capture all your contacts from the open houses. So that's the open house and visitor. Now, there's something here that you probably didn't see. All of our communication with the visitor will be for the benefit of the seller. What if you're an agent from a different office doing that open house? My risk management attorney says because of all this, we should not be doing that anymore. Do not shoot me. Do not point weapons at me. But it looks like that practice will have to halt. Yes.
Agents here in the office. So when I sit in an open house, I'm not under any agreement
Well-
other than a courtesy agreement with the seller's agent. So who am I representing while I'm sitting there?
The seller. If you're doing it for an agent in this office, remember, every agent in this office takes the listing on behalf of the broker. That's me. So the broker, you're under me as well. So it's the office's listing, even though you're getting paid as the agent for it. So if you're in the office, you can go handle open house for anyone else in the office and we're good. And you're representing the seller. Okay? And we don't have to do the AAA just for open house, in case you're wondering.
But I'm also trying to attract buyers to list
Of
with
course
me
you are.
Alone.
Of course you
So
are.
at that moment, what do I have them sign? Do I have them?
No, you don't have to have them sign anything right away. But you can have a conversation with the buyer who says, oh my gosh, you really are knowledgeable. I really, really like you. And you can say, that's great. Can we set an appointment on Monday? And what I'd like to do is explain to you how buyer representation works, and get a sense of what your needs are. And after that discussion, if it looks like it's good for us to work together, there's a couple forms we have to fill out.
Thank you.
Boom, boom, boom. You're done.
This is a logistics question. I don't even know. So we've all been in open houses where we've had people come through and we've all been through open houses where we've had people come through and we really didn't get a chance to talk to them.
Right.
How am I gonna manage this if they haven't signed it? Or how, it's a logistics question. Do you understand the question?
Well, yeah, I mean, people come in and they blow right past it and all
Right.
that sort of thing. I mean, if you think it's going to be a buzzy open house with a lot of people,
Bring someone else on?
that's a perfect time to bring a younger agent or a newer agent in the office and let them handle the admin at the front of the house
that's what I
while
was
you're
thinking.
handling the back of the house. If it's an open house where, gosh, I've had this listed for a couple weeks, I usually get 5 to 10 groups. You're going to be able to handle that one on your own. So, new listing. I know I've priced it right. It's a hot neighborhood. Yeah, bring someone with you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the last form, and it's 12:42. And we did handle a lot of questions, and we have more. So I'm happy to stay here for an additional period in answering questions. So if you have a question, pop it up. If I start running out of time, I'll let you guys know. Thank you for your patience. This is the first time I've had to teach this one. And we know there's a lot of changes. Samantha, I see you raising your hand from Larchmont. And then I'll get to the questions in the room. Samantha, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for this. This was super informative. Regarding not doing open houses for other brokerages, would the offices that you are the broker for, would we all fall under the same brokerage, so to speak? or just-
Unfortunately not, because each office has what's called a corporate license, and I'm the designated officer for that specific corporation. So it's possible if one of the offices I represent sues one of the other offices, I'm suing myself. But yeah, that's how that works. Okay, questions in the question, we'll go with that one in the back and then we'll get to you, okay? Yeah.
Thank you,
He had the
Jeff.
microphone.
So with all of this that we have covered over the last few hours, what's the new role, I guess, of the listing agents, responsibilities, or I guess like doing the job and explaining to the seller. So if we want to sell the property, we will have to attract basically offer whatever way and shape and form the compensation. So what kind of practice are they going to follow with all these changes coming up?
Well, I'll tell you the conversations I plan to have, right? What I'll basically say to sellers, hey, listen, I'm sure you've heard about the NAR settlement. And one of the outcomes of that is that we're no longer allowed to offer the buyer's broker or cooperating compensation. Now, you've probably heard the buzz that some people think that means the sellers don't have to pay any commission to the buyer's agent. And let me make sure we're on the same wavelength there. Is your goal, seller, to get the house sold as quickly as possible for the highest possible price? Yes, it is. Well, let me tell you what my experience has shown. When a seller offers a fair commission, we get more offers. We get more traffic in here. More traffic means more offers. More offers at the end of the day means more money for you. And if you'd like, I can work through a spreadsheet to show you how that works. If I'm able to tell other agents that you are willing to consider an offer that includes a request for the seller to pay the buyer's obligation to pay a commission, or you're willing to make a concession, I guarantee you, well, not guarantee you, but I feel very strongly that I can attract 50 to 75% more traffic in this house. And if that results in in 5 to 10 offers as opposed to 2 or 3, I am a razor sharp negotiator, or you wouldn't have hired me in the first place. You're going to get more money than if you had decided that you weren't going to pay any comp at all. Now, it's up to you. This is negotiable. But to be perfectly honest with you, do you think I'm the right person to sell your house? Well, yeah, you did this, you did that. Then take my word on this. I won't sell it. I won't take a listing where you're not willing to at least consider this, because I'm not sure I can assure your success otherwise. And that's what this is about. You need to be in San Diego for that new job in 3 months. And I've been doing this for 20 years. Here's the formula I need to get that done. Now, that was a little rough because it was off the top of my head, but I've been thinking about for a while. That's what I plan to do. And I think the top agents who have the confidence to do that, they're going to get it. They are going to get it. The agents who are scared will not get it. Remember, all your clients, buyer side, seller side, they want competence, they want confidence. You deliver those 2 items, you get the deals. The minute was like, well, you know, it's kind of a new environment, so we're feeling our way out here. It's like, oh,
You were saying.
yeah. What?
You were saying earlier.
Yeah. They're gonna, you know, subconsciously at the very least, they're gonna think, oh, well, you know, maybe I can push this through and not have to pay anyone. And great, you get the listing and then you go out there. And I think what I said is very true. There's going to be a lot of buyers out there who say, hey, if they're not willing to look at my offer asking for comp, don't submit the offer. So we're going to have to sell that message and educate, and you're going to have to be confident this is the right thing to do. You know, well, I have another agent who came in here and they said that they can get my house sold, you know, without offering cooperating commission. And they're only going to do, you know, charge me 2%. Oh, well, how long did it take them to come down to that 2% number? What magic negotiating words did you use? Well, I didn't have to use anything. They just offered it. Well, I thought you said you wanted a razor sharp negotiator to sell your house. Well, yeah, that's very important. And they just gave away, you know, a portion of their compensation. How heavy do you think they're going to negotiate for you on the ultimate price of the house? You pay good agents, you get more money. And give me the chance to go out there and find that good agent. And, you know, maybe we will get an offer where someone offers 1.5 million and the buyer's agent doesn't need any comp. My feeling is that's going to be very unlikely. And, but if you give me the opportunity to say that you'd be willing to pay, you know, willing to look at offers that ask for it, I'm going to be able to generate a lot more choices for you, and very likely better choices. And these are the messages we're gonna have to deliver, guys.
So Jim Curtis, would you actually, if that person said to you, I'm not gonna pay the buyer's commission, would you sign that list?
Probably not. And the threat, if, but I never talk about commission until I've gone through my marketing program to sell the house. And part of that, my trial close at the end of that is this the program that's gonna get your house sold? Well, yeah, this is the best program I've ever seen. That's the response I want, at least. Yeah, I think, you're my guy. I want you. I go, fine, if we can come to agreement on how commissions are gonna be handled, you're gonna be willing to move forward, sign a listing agreement today? Well, yeah, let's have that discussion. Boom. So you need to get a level of buy-in with them. If you lead with commission before they're committed to you or feel that you have a program that's gonna be successful, I don't think you'll be successful with them. But if you do it that way, I think your chances of success are much higher.
If you say something, this is negotiable, so we can put this in there that we are going to.
Yeah,
offer a
it's gonna be
concession.
negotiable.
But if it's an offer that you don't like, you don't have to accept it, or you can counter it back out.
Absolutely. You tell the seller it's fully negotiable, but give me the opportunity to say that you'll consider it. Yeah.
I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's very powerful. And I like one thing, Frank, is that all of us in a group masterminding, sharing experiences, it's a new field. What I'm saying I think will work, but what if it doesn't? Or what if it needs tweaking? So, talk to agents who you know, who you value, and have discussions. What worked, what didn't work, what was, something, objections that you got, how did you handle it? How did that objection go over? We'll get strong, we'll get better as time goes. But the confidence and competence message and, focusing on what's going to make you successful, Mr. Seller, and get you the most money in your pocket and the house sold quickest. These are that's the messaging. It's just what's the best way to deliver it. Okay.
So my question was on the BRBC.
Yes.
Letter H, other terms, you didn't say anything. What is that?
Well, for example, what if you want the cancellation period to be longer? Instead of 30-day cancellation for exclusive agreement, you want it to be 60. So that's another term you can write in. So it's just if there's some special term that's not addressed in the agreement that you need to write in, that's your chance to do it. Okay. Any other questions from Zoom land?
Yeah, I have one, speaking from the perspective of a listing agent. Part of our job is to help our sellers find the buyer that's going to close, that we're not going to go into escrow and then it's going to fall out, vetting lenders, proof of funds, all that. Is there but we don't have direct communication with the buyer, we're communicating with their agent. But as we know, we're getting a ton of education on this that a lot of other agents either aren't participating in or maybe aren't getting. So that whole thing about the non-exclusive and a buyer potentially getting themselves tied up in a situation where they have some escrow demand that it can't close on that. Is there anything at all that you would suggest or you think we could do to protect our seller to make sure that the agent representing the buyer is the only one that has a claim to that commission?
Not off the top of my head, but let me think that through offline, okay? Do me a favor, shoot me an email with that question, because there's also someone else I want to run it by. I think it's a good question. I just don't have an answer off the top of my head. And my email is jeff@jeffcurtisteam.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. June, you have a question?
Yeah, another quick one. So just to confirm with the listing agreement, when say like our typical MO was to ask for 5% and then 2.5% to go to buyer, now we would just be putting in our 2.5%.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
I would really hope that agents across the board, not just our office, but everywhere, really hammer home that you should consider strongly putting in the payment to the buyer's agent. And if it's not an offer that you don't like, you will not have to pay that, but it gives
That's
us
correct.
choice.
That's correct.
And it's such an important thing for our industry that we, I think, present that.
Yeah, I think we should as well. And that's a very good point. Yeah.
Can you repeat that? We can't hear it on Zoom.
What Frank is saying, oh, okay, I'll let Frank do it. He's getting a microphone right now.
I was just saying that I thought it was very important that as an industry that we hammer home when we're signing listing agreements that to have the ability for choice to offer the buyer's agent's commission is a very good thing. It's a powerful thing. And if it's an offer that you don't like, you do not have to pay that. It could be countered out, but it gives us that power and that choice right out of the gate to get more people into the house and potentially sold.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
My question is about commercial. I'm about to take a listing agreement for the commercial lease. So I don't see the change in the commercial lease listing form. So what do I do?
Take it on the commercial leasing form. You see, this is primarily focused at residential 1 to 4 units. This was, commercial wasn't part of the settlement. Leases, residential leases, as far, I don't know what the changes will be on residential leases at this point. As far as I know, that's not covered either, but I have a question out to risk management on that. But none of those forms have been changed.
Yes. And then I have to tell my clients, as of now, that we are going to take 5% split between the two, 2.5, 2.5, but will they list it on the MLS? I can do that on LoopNet, but MLS, I don't know.
You won't be able to do it on the MLS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
This is really helpful.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm off, you guys. Good luck, and there will be more training, but this is a start, okay?
Thank you so much. This was super, super helpful.
Happy to help. Okay, see you guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Awesome work.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.